Soon after I can't even believe I have to say this, nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania last month, Bobby called me to express his best wishes. He knows firsthand the risks incurred by leaders who stand up to the corrupt political establishment. When you stand up, you bring on some trouble for yourself, but you have to do what's right. You have to do what's right for the country. I will tell you, we are both in this to do what's right for the country. That's one thing I can tell you. He lost his father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated threats to his safety during the course of his campaign while being denied protection by the Harris-Biden administration. And this is a tribute in honor of Bobby. I am announcing tonight that upon my election, I will establish a new independent presidential commission on assassination attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And they will also conduct a rigorous review of the attack last month.
The Republicans.
For Trump to win against Bush and Gore or Bush and Bradley or McCain in this mix, he has to do what?
Well, look, again, you're starting off with a base that's really been there for a very short period of time. Okay,
you begin down.
You're not starting off from, gee, I just got the Democratic or the Republican.
But Perot once led in the polls.
He was doing very well in the polls. I mean, had he not dropped out,
he might have won.
And then announced practically a couple of days later on your show. It's very interesting because I was watching that show and I like him. And I'm watching the show and I'm saying, I don't believe it. I think he wants to get back into the race. This was after he had dropped out 2 days before. And you know, I'm pretty good at seeing what people want.
So who do you get?
Who do I get in terms of what?
Voters.
Oh,
I mean, you got the Republican base and the Democratic base.
I think what I get is I get the working base. I get the middle class base. For some reason, those are the people that really like Donald Trump. And I think I do well, and I think I get a lot of votes. But if I thought I was going to get the reform nomination and then get 21 or 22% of the vote, I'm not interested.
Even though that would be the largest
I'm just not. It wouldn't matter. And then you know what happens? The next day I'm back in my office.
We'll be back with our remaining moments with Donald Trump on this rather historic night, the announcement of a presidential exploratory committee. This letter that you got from JFK, August 19th, July 19th, 99. Your father passed away when, in July?
JFK Jr., that's exactly correct. He just, I mean, it must have been one of the last things he did. He was a great guy. He was a friend of mine.
Dear Donald, I read over the weekend of your father's passing, and I just wanted to drop you a note. No matter where you are in life, losing a parent changes you. I know you had an active relationship, and I hope you'll get ample time to reflect. He sounds like a fascinating man from what I read in the Times. I like that he would go over his
various
work sites and pick up stray nails and return them. And clearly, he never lost his perspective. My condolences to you and your family. Sincerely, John Kennedy.
This was a tragedy that he died because he had so much going. He was a fabulous guy. I mean, he was really, truly a handsome, wonderful, great, bright guy.
Is that line correct? No matter where you are in life, losing a parent changes you.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough.
Did losing your father change you?
He taught me so much. He was just a special guy. He was a firm guy, but just a special guy.
I got to know John Kennedy very well. John. Fantastic. I think he would have been president. I think he was selling, he had a magazine named George, and he was going to be selling that. He wanted to get out. His mother wanted him to go into politics really strongly. He wanted to be an actor. And he loved the concept of being an actor. And he was a handsome guy, very handsome guy. And I think he probably would have been good at whatever he wanted to do. He was with Caroline. He just, before he got married, after he got married. They fought like cats and dogs, but they loved each other. This was a different than your relationship with your beautiful wife, but they fought, and then and say this isn't going to work out, and then you see them hugging and kissing, right? So they had a rather volatile relationship, as the expression goes, but it was fine. It worked. And then they got into that plan, and it was just a disaster. But he would have, he was getting ready to, I think he would have run for the Senate from New York, or someplace, but probably New York, and wanted to do it. And he was all set for that. And his mother really wanted him to do that. And, had a great look, handsome, very handsome guy, the top of the line, really. And I think he probably would have done well, and he would have done well. He probably would have been president. I think he would have been president.
What else is in the entrance there at Mar-a-Lago? Go past Heather's desk on the right, and there's a little seating area. In that seating area, in this library section that you're talking about, that is kind of this sitting room, the first thing that you come to is a 747 on the table right there at the entrance. I could probably send you a picture of it. I'll send you a picture of it. You'll get a kick out of it. Normally, you don't. A courtesy is you don't take pictures of Mar-a-Lago. It's a private club, and you get a few people get an exception. So right there on the table is the 747. It's Air Force One. Only thing is, it's Air Force One, and when President Trump was in office, one day the reporters are in there. They see the Air Force One on the table, and Barron is kind of shuffling it around and playing with it there. Well, what is it? It's painted in the same colors as John Jr.'s aircraft was when it crashed in '99. And so this black and red stripe paint scheme on Air Force One, and President Trump said he was thinking about new color combination, new markings for Air Force One. And so he very famously did that. Well, then people realized, why these colors specifically? Because it was Junior's, that which was denied to him because he passed away in this plane crash, is the story.
Number 21%, JFK Jr., who's a very nice person. I know him very well. He's a very, very fine person. He's at 21%.
But
George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late-night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process. And while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.
Do you think he would have run for president?
John?
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I talked to him about it. In that era, for him and me, almost everywhere we went, there was people who wanted to talk about the Kennedy family. I think he wanted to run, not on the Kennedy legacy, but he wanted to run because he was capable, he had great ideas, and he was interesting, and he was charismatic. And so I think there was part of him that said, I don't want to do this just because everybody in my family's been doing it, and then run on the Kennedy name. I thought that was admirable about him. Please go to Kennedy24.com.
You took out a full-page ad in major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily. I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of this year's presidential race, the way it's shaping up?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think that probably George Bush has an advantage in terms of the election. I think that probably people would say that he's got like that little edge in terms of the incumbency, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jesse Jackson's done himself very proud. I think Michael Dukakis has done one hell of a job. And George Bush has done a hell of a job. You know, they all went in there sort of as semi-underdogs, including George Bush, and they've all come out. I think people that are around all three of those candidates can be very proud of the jobs they've done.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined. I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing. This country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been, believe me.
Hi, YouTubers! I'm excited to give you an update about our own YouTube channel. Now you can find new videos every day. They're the kind of videos that will make you look at life differently. They may even make you laugh a little bit. Who doesn't need a daily dose of that? So here's just a taste of some of what you'll see.
And Ted Kennedy, believe it or not, was a friend of mine. I met him through Palm Beach. They had a big house, a compound. They call it the Kennedy compound. And I had a very nice house also. But I got to know him very well, and he liked me. And I one time asked him, who's the smartest guy in the U.S. Senate? He was a smart guy, by the way, Ted Kennedy, very smart, great politician. And I said, who's the smartest guy in the Senate? And we were friends. I did him a big favor, I will tell you that. Big favor, really big. And it wasn't hard for me to do, but it was very big and important for him. And he liked me, and I liked him. I said, who's the smartest in the Senate? And he gave me a name, but I won't tell you, because I can't stand the guy, actually. Still around. Can't stand him. I was disappointed to hear that name. I said, who's the dumbest in the Senate? He goes, I don't know, let's see. Probably Joe. I said, who's Joe? He said, Joe Biden. Can you, this is 25, 30 years ago, a long time ago. I think it was one of the early times I've ever heard the name. And that was in prime time for him, but this is in prime time. Joe gave us the war on Israel and the war on American energy. What he did to our energy was we were energy independent. Think of it as president, I will shut off Iranian oil and I will turn on American oil. And we will drill, baby, drill, and we'll get things back to where they are supposed to be.
Join me now as I bring to this podium a young man whom we all clasp to our hearts and whom we will love today as we have in the past and whom we'll come to love in the future, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Jr.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Over a quarter century ago, my father stood before you to accept the nomination for the presidency of the United States. So many of you came into public service because of him. In a very real sense, because of you, he is with us still. And for that, I'm grateful to all of you. I owe a special debt to the man his nephews and nieces call Teddy. Not just because of what he means to me personally, but because of the causes he has carried on. He has shown that an unwavering commitment to the poor, to the elderly, to those without hope, regardless of fashion or convention, is the greatest reward of public service. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not a political leader, but I can speak for those of my age who have been inspired by Teddy to give their energy and their ideas to their community and not just to themselves. Thank you. Thank you. In that ongoing effort, young people, and not only the young, but all like-minded citizens, all of you, will be guided by the honorable and unyielding example of the senior senator from Massachusetts. He has shown that our hope is not lost idealism, but a realistic possibility. America is better because of the leadership of Edward Kennedy. Thank you. May he continue to guide us for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, my uncle, Ted Kennedy.
On Monday, George W. Bush will campaign in South Carolina for his brother. As you said tonight, and you've often said, the Iraq War and your opposition to it was a sign of your good judgment. In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing, close quote. When you were asked what you meant by that, you said, for the war. For the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should have been impeached?
First of all, I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder. I have my wife and I have my son. That's all I have. I don't have this. So let me just tell you, I get along with everybody, which is my obligation to my company, to myself, etc. Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say, and he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush. When a member on the stage's brother gets attacked, the brother gets to respond.
Do I get to do it 5 or 6 times or just once
nice.
responding to that? So here's the deal. I'm sick and tired of Barack Obama blaming my brother for all of the problems that he's had. And frankly, I could care less about the insults that Donald Trump gives to me. It's blood sport for him. He enjoys it, and I'm glad he's happy about it. But I am sick and tired of him going after my family. My dad is the greatest man alive in my mind. And while Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did. And he's had the gall to go after my mother.
The World Trade Center came down during your brother's reign.
He's had the gall to go after my mother.
Remember that.
Hold on.
Let me finish this. He's had the gall to go after my mother.
That's not keeping
Look, I
us
won
safe.
the lottery when I was born 63 years ago and looked up and I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
not about my family or his family.
Okay.
This is about the South Carolina families that need someone to be a commander-in-chief that can lead. And I'm that person.
Governor Kasich, would you weigh in on?
Even if he has his window open and he's hanging out of it, he'll be on the other side of the ship.
I mean, if he's driving, we've got a good shot.
Yeah, if he's driving with the front window open.
Yeah, or if it's a convertible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah. Like if he just pulls up by
like
himself
JFK.
It's
It's like a JFK, a Lincoln.
I think it's one time they did. No, it doesn't. Oh.
Maybe someone, just like they told JFK, you know what you should do? You should take a convertible. It's so nice out.
Are people trying to draft you to run for president up in New Hampshire?
Well, I guess a lot of people want to see this country. It's a shame what's happening. Japan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, everybody's taking advantage of the United States. People know that if certain people are running a country, that it won't happen. I mean, when you look at Japan, not paying for the defense. We're defending Japan. We're losing billions and billions of dollars. We're fighting for AIDS help and for farmers and for this and that. And it's a shame. And the Japanese folks, who I respect greatly, but they're not treating us fairly. They're really not treating us fairly. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, they're not paying us anything for the services we're rendering, and I think it's a disgrace. And I think people look at certain people, and maybe me, if I were in a position, this country, believe me, would not be ripped off like it is. And it is just being ripped off so badly by our so-called allies.
Yeah, so that's a pretty strong statement. So now are you saying
I don't think it's strong, I think it's fair. And by the way, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese. I do a lot of business with the Japanese. And they smile about it too, they know it. The country is losing billions and billions of dollars to Japan, and we can't afford to lose. And it's a shame.
But so now, are you saying this by way of indicating that you could do it better, and you do intend to run for president at some point?
No, I'm not going to run for president, but I think somebody...
Now, in 8 years, if you came back, would you have a different answer? In 4 years,
I tend to doubt it. I really tend to
Really?
doubt it. But I just think that there are so many ways that this country can straighten itself out, and we're not going about those ways. Cutting farm aid is not the appropriate thing. Cutting help for the homeless and help for the poor and welfare... Certain things can be done that really will mean big dollars to this country, and those things are not being done right now.
You know, sitting here listening to this stuff, it seems to me you are dying to get to some public platform to superimpose those feelings upon the American awareness.
Well, maybe so, but I'm not. I would like to have the feelings known and let somebody else do it, and it can be done. If the ball's carried correctly, it can be done.
Yeah, but if you want something done right...
Do it yourself.
You think your father's career will ultimately have an influence on where you go?
Well, like I said before, I think, that really we've been raised the way we've been raised, and I think the way that most of my family thinks is that his goals and a lot of his ideals are really worth pursuing. And that's what my mother's been working on.
Even at the risk of the tragic events of your father and your uncle?
Well, I didn't necessarily say I was going to go into politics. I mean, I think I've got a lot of thinking to do about what...
I would think so. You'd have to think twice about that, wouldn't you? Does it frighten you at all?
Well, I think that's an occupational hazard at this point, I think there's so much that you can do through politics or through some kind of public service.
I'll tell you what, you take a look at MSDNC, how evil they are. They're evil. They're sick. They shouldn't even be allowed to do what they do because it's so corrupt. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. They are fighting me. And to think that I had The Apprentice on NBC and I did so great for them. I said before the election, long before I started even, I said, well, one thing for sure, I did so much, I made so much money for NBC. They hadn't had a #1 show in years. They were dying. And that idiot Jeff Zucker was running it poorly. He was running it to the ground. And I came on and I gave them ratings like they haven't had in years. And when I said, I'm going to leave the show now, they wanted me to extend. Instead, they got Arnold Schwarzenegger. What happened is, I said, no, I'm going to leave because, boy, are you quiet when you hear this one. Because you haven't heard this before. This isn't part of the repertoire. Right? Right, Bert? You haven't heard this one, but you hear how quiet? It's almost like when I do The Snake. It's very quiet. It's so quiet. You can hear a pin drop, but it's true. I said, one thing that's going to happen, if I decide to leave the show, and they wanted me to extend, they were offering me 3 years, 5, anything I wanted. I said, no, I'm going to run for president. Don't forget, we did it for 14 seasons. That's enough, right? But I said, we're going to run. It's hard to give up prime time and a lot of money, no matter how rich. It's a lot of money you make. But you give up primetime television, Thursday nights. It was a hard thing to do, but I said, no, I'm going to run for president. And they were so upset, and they said, no, no, no. And I decided to do it. And they said, who do you think we should use? I said, I have no idea. That's your business, not mine. And they said, what do you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger? I said, hey, he's a movie star. Maybe he'll do well. The guy got killed. He couldn't get anything. You know, Flies watched. Flies. And the show was canceled. Remember, they tried Martha Stewart, too. How did that work out? She blamed me. She said, it's your fault that she failed doing the... I said, why? She couldn't tell us why. I don't know. She never figured that one out. But they used her. But they used Arnold Schwarzenegger, big movie star, and he failed so badly. Actually, they asked me, because I own it with Mark Burnett, right? Mark Burnett's great, and I own it. And they said, well, you own it, so you would like to have it do well. I said, I would. They said, would you rather have it do unbelievably with our big movie star comes in, Arnold Schwarzenegger, or would you rather have it fail? I thought about it for a little while, and I said, honestly, I'd much rather have it fail because it makes me look better, right? Right? I'm not looking for him to come in and top Trump. No, it worked out just fine. He failed. It was like a total disaster. But I did it for 14 seasons, and I said to NBC, you know, I respect you guys. I liked them. I mean, I liked them. But the bosses came up. They tried to talk to me. 5 guys came up, and they wanted to talk to me. They call them suits, but the top suits, the top. And I just said, no, I've decided I'm going to run for president. But, you know, you won't win. It's impossible to win. Nobody's ever done that before. There's never been a person that ran for president that wasn't either a politician or a general. I think it's 92% are politicians and 8% were generals. Did anybody know these little facts of wisdom? So you had to be a general, I guess an admiral and all, but there were no admirals. 8% generals and 92, think of that, 92% politicians. I said, I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to give it a shot. And I announced and immediately went to #1 and stayed there for a long time. Remember, I had center of stage. And then I got angry because I said, no, I want to be in the center. I don't want to be tied for the center. Those guys don't come close. So we had to have a different number. So it didn't have to be 10. It had to be 9 or it had to be 11. It had to be something. But it couldn't be an even number. And they got angry at me. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So then they ended up doing what I said. But right from the beginning, it worked. And then I got on television, and they asked me that horrible, horrible question, remember? And I said, oh, am I dead? That's the first question I ever got. Megyn Kelly, may she rest in peace. She's sort of making a career by pretending she likes me. And then... so what happened is she asked me that horrible question about women. Women love me. You know, I protect women. I protect. They talk about suburban housewives.
And look at that. These are suburban housewives from North Carolina. They followed me. This is their 117th rally. You believe that? 117. I don't know what the hell their husbands are doing. They're home alone saying, is my wife okay? No, I mean, we're not so far, but you know, when they go out to Texas and California, there's like 40 of them, and they look great, but I don't think the husbands can be too happy. Are your husbands happy about this? Are they okay with? Yes. Well, you have very nice husbands, I'll tell you. But it was an amazing phenomenon, and I do protect women. Look, they talk about suburban housewives. I believe I'm doing well. You know, the polls are all rigged. Of course, lately they haven't been rigged because I'm winning by so much, I don't want to say it. Disregard that statement. I love the polls very much. We're beating him by so much, but with the suburban, they always say suburban housewives, they want something that's very important, security. They don't want illegal immigrants coming into our country. They don't want illegal immigrants knocking on their front door and saying, I'm going to use your kitchen and I'm going to use your bedroom, and there's not a damn thing. And that's the nice ones, okay? That's the nice ones. They want safety, they want security, and that's what I provide. I had the safest border in the history of our country. Now we have the worst border in the history of our world. So we went out and we did it, and we went to #1 almost immediately, right? I think immediately. I think the first week or something was, you know, I wasn't given credit because it was only one day of the week. So I said, I didn't start off too well. They said, well, you were only given credit for like a half a day. I said, that's okay. So let's see how I do. We went to #1 immediately. From the day we came down that beautiful escalator in Trump Tower with our First Lady, who people love our First Lady, I want to tell you. She says hello. We went to #1 and we never left. And then we had a beat. I don't call her crooked anymore. I use that term for Joe. Joe's crooked. And I don't call Hillary anything. I don't even think about her anymore, to be honest with you. But we went to #1, and then we weren't supposed to win the election, and that's what they hate me for, because I won an election that the Republicans were not supposed to win. We weren't supposed to win it. In New Hampshire, I got the most votes in the history of the state of New Hampshire. Now think of this for a second. New Hampshire, and it's up there in, Kennedy territory, right? JFK ran. I got more votes than JFK. A lot of great people, historic people ran, and that's in either party. I got more votes than anybody in either party.
You know, they say you can tell a lot about a future president by how he behaves as president-elect, and with 11 days ahead of his inauguration, a lot of people are doing that right now with this president-elect and trying to size up what kind of president he could make, just as they've done with a number of his predecessors, including JFK. Against whom historian Jonathan Lewis finds more parallels than you might imagine. Very good to have you. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure for being here.
At first blush, that sounded like, well, that's kind of bizarre. But what do you see? What are the similarities?
Well, to your point, many people are surprised to think that they should be similar, right? We look at it and we say to ourselves, JFK, the youngest guy elected president, Trump the oldest. Right. JFK, a Democrat, Trump, a Republican. But when you dig a little bit underneath the surface, there are some pretty notable similarities. One, they both used media in surprising ways. JFK used the new medium, television, to speak directly to the American people in a way never before done. Of course, Trump used social media, and specifically Twitter, to speak to the American people in a way never before done. They're both disruptors, and I think that's critically important. JFK viewed his predecessor, Eisenhower, as being slow-moving and behind the times in foreign policy. Trump the same. He views Obama as slow-moving and behind the times.
And yet he was the younger guy, right?
Exactly.
So it's the opposite there. Do you think, Jonathan, that a lot has been put on, the pressure's been put on Donald Trump because critics have said, you're not a real Republican, not a conservative. People later said the same about JFK. Wait a minute, you're espousing these big old tax cuts. That's not what liberals do. So they were much more pragmatic in their approach to the job. What do you think of that?
Well, I think at the end of the day, neither one is an ideologue, and I think that's important, and that's a reason for optimism.
That you can be flexible.
Because being flexible is critical. for a successful presidency. However, I would think what's notable and what we should all be thinking about is the parallels that are of concern is if JFK was predisposed to take action early in his presidency, and he was frustrated by Congress. Even though the Democrats dominated Congress, he had a tough time making progress. And so he took action where he could, which was in foreign affairs. And that very forceful action led to the Bay of Pigs, which was a disaster. He had a summit with Khrushchev not that many weeks later. That was a disaster. That disastrous
Some
summit.
people say it set up the Cuban Missile Crisis.
It set up the Berlin Wall. The Soviets erected the Berlin Wall not many weeks later, and Kennedy did nothing. And then, of course, it was the setup to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I think
But he came in cautious, as you said. Now, the rap against Donald Trump is he's anything but cautious. But actually, he's quite cautious, isn't he?
Well, I would say, if you're asking me the direct question, do I think that Trump is cautious? I would say thus far his use of Twitter suggests not. I think he's been aggressive in promoting his views through social media, and I think it's too early to tell. And with regards to caution, I think the similarity between him and JFK that suggests otherwise is the intervention in our economy. The stock market peaked in late 1961. It began to groan under the weight of JFK's failed foreign policy initiatives. It really accelerated the downdraft when Kennedy intervened in the economy. He was flailing. He needed a success, and he decided to take action against the U.S. steel industry. Steel had raised, the U.S. steel industry was raising prices. That was restrictive on the economy.
He called him on it publicly.
And Kennedy called
Donald
him on
Trump's doing all of this as president-elect. That's unprecedented.
Absolutely, and that's where we have to draw the parallel. Again, the similarity and the concern. Investors don't like it when presidents intervene in the economy. That's called central planning. And in a free market society, that's anathema. So the Kennedy slide, which began in late '61, ended up leading to a drop of about 27%. Nothing that would make investors happy. Now, of course,
What do you mean 27%?
From top to bottom,
Oh, I see.
it was a drop.
Right,
it was a pretty meaningful slide.
And ironically, the bang we got to turn that around came from the tax cuts that materialized after his death.
Exactly. So the key thing to note is JFK was a learner. He stumbled in foreign policy. He stumbled in his intervention in the economy.
He was willing and able to pivot. I always think that's crucial, to acknowledge a mistake and don't keep going down the same road if you're banging your head against the wall.
And that's his claim to greatness, is that as he entered '63, he was a learner. He realized what he'd done wrong. He changed. He pivoted. And
Would
unfortunately,
Donald Trump be the same way?
Well, there certainly is evidence that he has the capacity for flexibility, and that's what we'll all have to watch very, very closely.
As an historian, do you worry about a president who will tweet a lot?
I worry about the unintended consequences of communication strategies. And so therefore we have to be worried about the tweeting, and particularly so because, like Kennedy, Trump has surrounded himself with some notable advisors inexperienced in foreign affairs. And some of Trump's tweets have been national security related. So I think we have to draw those parallels, in particular between McNamara and Tillerson, and raise the question, do we have all the experience we need in foreign affairs?
You know, McNamara had impeccable credentials, but he still got us into Vietnam, didn't he?
Exactly. He was a private sector leader, president of Ford Motor, and it was those private sector credentials that attracted Kennedy to him.
All right. Jonathan Lewis, Vieira Capital, CIO, historian extraordinary. Interesting read. So share that with your friends. There might be more in parallel here than we generally get thought.
There are little interviews and things that float around on Instagram of you talking about your father, talking about your brother, and it got me to think, like, who do you think in your life you maybe miss the most? Living or dead, but people who you don't get to talk to every day anymore. Who do you miss the most?
Well, I had two really good brothers, right? And both passed away. One had a problem with alcohol. It taught me so much because he said, don't drink, and, don't drink. At that time, is a long time ago, drugs were not a big factor, but alcohol was. Yeah. And he was very insistent on, don't drink, don't smoke. He said, don't smoke. And that was another thing that he added in, but it had a big impact on me. But I had a father that I was very close to. My other brother, Robert, I was very close to, passed away 2 years ago. A wonderful guy. He was so proud of me. He was so proud of the fact that I became president. He was amazing. A lot of siblings, they're jealous. They don't, I'm just as good as him or something. It's, you have that. And maybe it's natural, maybe it's not natural, but you have it a lot. Probably much more so than not. And he was great. He was a great supporter of mine. He thought it was so incredible. He couldn't believe it. And so we miss him, and I miss my father. You learn from people. My father was a great guy. He was very strong, very tough, but he had a tremendous heart, a tremendous heart. He was very generous in so many ways. You wouldn't know that. He loved what he did. He was a builder in Brooklyn, mostly, in Queens. And he loved work. And it taught me you have to love what you do to be good at it. He was good at it. And you have to love what you do. I don't see people, I study it. I wrote books on it, lots of books, successful books. And I just see that successful people are always loving what they do. And they work 24 hours a day, but when they work 24 hours a day, it's not really work, you know, it's not work.
You love what you do.
Yeah, I do. I love what I do, and I love now doing this because we really, you know, the theme is make America great again. How does it get better than that? I watched Biden say, and those MAGA people, MAGA is make America great again. I don't think he understands that. I think if you asked him, what does MAGA stand for? I don't think he'd even know, to be honest. Give him a test. That's a great question for him someday. What does MAGA stand for? I'll bet you he couldn't tell you that. But it's make America great again. And we made America, we had the greatest economy in history.
A lot of documents, key documents, relating to your uncle's assassination continue to be classified 60 years later, even though almost everybody involved, not everybody, but almost everybody involved is dead for quite a long time. Do you believe that his resistance to escalating the war in Vietnam in the way you just described was a reason for that assassination? And would you intend to declassify all of those documents immediately upon being president?
I mean, legally, they should have been declassified in 2016. Trump promised he'd do it, and then he never did it. Who knows why he didn't do it? That is a real mystery, because he doesn't like the CIA much. So I don't know why he didn't declassify them. But of course I would declassify them. If this is a 60-year-old murder, why are they still hiding stuff? Why is the institution of the CIA still hiding material on my uncle's death? If you like this video and you want to help me become president of the United States, go to Kennedy24.com and donate now.
The long-awaited JFK files are out, in part. 2,800 never-before-seen records on the assassination of JFK were released by the National Archives, but hundreds remain classified. President Trump said he had no choice but to heed warnings from the CIA and FBI to keep some of the files secret for further review. Releasing them unredacted could pose irreversible harm to our national security.
In my last conversation with President Trump in the White House, he called me a lot. And this is after January 6th, so it's 2 weeks before, or a week before he's leaving office. He wanted to run past me the names of people he was going to pardon and sentences he was going to commute. He wanted my opinion on them. Some of them I knew. I said, how you doing? He said, not too well. And he went off into a tangent about what he thought happened with the election. I said, you know, you made a promise to the public many times and to me privately that you haven't kept. What? I'll take care of it right now. I said, you promised you would release the records of the JFK assassination. He said to me, Judge, if they showed you what they showed me, you wouldn't have released it either. And I said, who's they and what did they show you? And then he said, Judge, someday when we're on the phone, and then he raised his voice, and there aren't 15 people listening to the phone call, back to a normal voice, I'll tell you.
Oh, my God.
I mean, this makes it sound even worse. Who are they? Probably somebody in the intelligence community. What did they show him? JFK's brains blown out?
This is it. You know, it was said by one person that after the Kennedy assassination, there has been no president. They have only been factotums of the system since then. Yeah. It may well be the most decisive event in modern American history.
Hi, everybody. On November 22nd, 1963, my uncle, President John F. Kennedy, was murdered in broad daylight in Dallas. For 60 years, the United States government has covered up the truth about that assassination, which is one of the reasons that it has lost the public trust. Was it a lone gunman, as the Warren Commission concluded in 1964? Or was there a larger conspiracy, as the House Select Committee on Assassination concluded after reviewing a much larger body of evidence in 1979? I have my own thoughts on that subject, but one thing is for sure: the antidote to conspiracy is transparency. In 1992, Congress mandated the release of all records related to the John F. Kennedy assassination by 2017. Well, that date has come and gone. President Trump refused to release thousands of pages of documents, and so did President Biden. No one seriously believes that any national security secrets are at stake 60 years later. What is so embarrassing that they want to hide? I don't know what those documents will show, but I do believe in transparency, which is the only way to restore trust in our government, the trust that began to erode in 1963. And that's why we're circulating a petition to ask President Biden to keep his promise by releasing all JFK assassination documents as required by the law. I'm asking you to share this video and sign the petition, and then I'll send it to President Biden to give him a chance to level with the American people.
Now, President Trump on Thursday ordered the release of more than 2,800 files on the 1963 assassination of former U.S. President John F. Kennedy. But he blocked the release of the remaining 300 files after last-minute requests from national security agencies to keep them under wraps. The redacted documents are undergoing a further 6-month review, but they could stay hidden even after that. White House officials did not provide major details of the contents of the records being shared on the National Archives website. Experts say, at this point at least, they don't expect the documents to reveal any huge bombshells. For the ones that have not been released, officials say they contain highly sensitive information, such as the identities of intelligence officials, law enforcement, as well as other details that may affect foreign policy.
Why do you think that our government could be involved in this evidence?
Listen, when the Warren Commission, obviously, which was run by Alan Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, who my uncle fired, found that it was a lone shooter, which was Lee Harvey Oswald. But when Congress, a congressional committee, reinvestigated between 1977 and 1979 the House Select Assassinations Committee, they concluded, and they saw a lot more documentation and had a lot more witnesses than the Warren Commission ever saw. They concluded that my uncle was killed by a conspiracy. And most of the people, for example, Richard Schweitzer, who was the head of the committee, publicly said JFK, the President of the United States, that the CIA was involved in the murder of the President of the United States. And that's quotation. Most of the people on that committee at that time believed it was the CIA, that it was believed certain people in the CIA.
You were 7 at the time? 7 or 8?
I was 10 when my uncle was killed. I was 14 when my father was killed. And today there's overwhelming evidence. I mean, in fact,
why don't the government needs to release all of the files on it and let be transparent. Let us see the information.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. There's still, the law requires, there's a law that requires that all the records of John Kennedy's assassination be released to the public 10 years ago. So they're still holding 5,000 documents. President Biden promised when he was elected that he was going to release those documents. President Trump promised that he would, but the CIA doesn't want them to. And so the question that I think Americans have a right to ask, including members of, my father and uncle's family, is why not? What is it that you don't want to see 60 years later? And by the way, the last tranche of documents released had documentation in there that finally got even the New York Times to admit that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset, that he was working for the CIA. So, if the Warren Commission had known that back in 1964, they would have had a very different time. And the House Assassinations Committee never knew that. That was released. We've known that we've had documentation that known that at least a decade. But some of that documentation became overwhelming in this last tranche, and finally the mainstream media acknowledged that, yeah, he had this relationship with the CIA going back to 1957 or 1958.
He was America's first Catholic president, and his assassination shocked the world. Now, more than 50 years later, President Trump authorizes the release of secret files related to the death of President John F. Kennedy. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. After much anticipation, more than 2,800 files were released yesterday to the public, but at the urging of the CIA and the FBI, the disclosure of hundreds more files have been blocked, at least for now. President Trump tweeting this morning, JFK files are being carefully released. In the end, there will be great transparency. It is my hope to get just about everything to public. The documents capture the frantic days after the assassination when federal agents madly chased after tips, juggled rumors, and followed leads worldwide. One memo says a British newspaper received an anonymous call about big news in the United States 25 minutes before Kennedy was shot in Dallas. The files could take weeks to sift through, but not all of them were released. Hugh Ainsworth, a journalist and witness to Kennedy's assassination, says the CIA and FBI have a lot of reasons for wanting to keep some files secret.
Gosh knows how many people our government tried to kill or did kill during that period of time. And that's why they're afraid of releasing this, because it will hurt. It will hurt the CIA particularly, and to some extent, I think it'll hurt the FBI.
Intelligence agencies pressured Trump to keep some information secret, and the president agrees it's best. I have no choice today but to accept those redactions rather than allow potentially irreversible harm to our nation's security. Federal agencies now have 5 months to explain why the remaining documents should be kept from public view. The president will review their case and make a decision about what should be disclosed. Secret Service agent Clint Hill, who jumped on Kennedy's car after he was shot, says the withholding of information all these years later is very suspect.
The more material they hold back, the more suspicious people become that there's hiding something. And I don't think they need to do that. I think that every bit of information they have should be released.
The released documents also contain reports stamped secret that reveal the suspicions of the error around Cubans and communists. They cast a wide net over varied activities of the Kennedy administration, like its efforts to upend Fidel Castro's government in Cuba.
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark.
How do we deal with the fact that our country, maybe since the death of your uncle, has been taken over by the CIA and the FBI and not by people who are running for the office like you are?
My uncle's death was really a turning point in this country. A month before he died, ordered all troops out of Vietnam with National Security Order 263. A week after his death, Johnson revoked that order, and then the next year sent 250,000 troops to Vietnam. My father then ran against Vietnam. He was killed. Martin Luther King was campaigning against Vietnam. He was killed. So those traumas, my uncle's death, King's death, my father's death, then the trauma of Vietnam itself, the trauma later on of 9/11, and ultimately the trauma of COVID pushed us down that road towards complete domination by the military-industrial complex, transforming America from an imperial state abroad, a surveillance and security state at home, and that's where we are today. But the dangerous part of the CIA is the plans division, which is the operations division that does the assassinations, fixing elections, bribing public officials, controlling the media, doing all this mischief, monkey business around the world. You need to separate those functions into agencies so that the espionage division is actually looking over the shoulder of the plans division and looking at blowback and saying, okay, well, you did kill that one terrorist with the drone strike in Afghanistan, but he has 12 brothers, and they all now are wearing suicide vests and causing all these problems. There's always been a concern that if you have a national police agency, it will be weaponized by the president to serve a political agenda. These national police agencies are really a feature of totalitarian regimes like the Stasi and East Germany, the KGB in Russia. 60 CIA agents or high-level officials signing a public letter that said that the Hunter Biden laptop was a fake, was Russian disinformation, when they either didn't know or they knew it was a lie. And that's something that we should not tolerate.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
I didn't start anything with the wife. A PAC, which he's very friendly with, released a cover story on my wife, who was a tremendously successful and elegant model. And she was on the cover of GQ magazine. I think it was GQ, right? A GQ magazine's not exactly Penthouse. But she was on the cover of GQ magazine, an artsy picture. But, you know, that's why she was a model, really successful. She didn't need to marry me. She was making a lot of money, believe me. In fact, I had to work hard to get her to marry me. It wasn't that easy. It's true. That's so true. You think I'm kidding? So they released this picture, which was, you know, to the people of the state of Utah. I love Utah. I love the people of Utah. But that's not where you want to necessarily send a risque picture. Everybody in Utah got a picture. And I don't think they showed that it was GQ. I don't even think they showed. They took the GQ off. They cut all the stuff out, so they didn't say it was a magazine cover from, you know, a reasonably respected magazine. And it was Melania Trump. Now, and I'm saying this just to clear it up, because they said, he took it back. I didn't do anything. Then when I saw somebody tweeted a picture of Melania and a picture of Heidi, who I think, by the way, is a very nice woman and a very beautiful woman. I have to tell you, I think Heidi Cruz is a great person. I think it's the best thing he's got going, and his kids, if you want to know the truth. In a certain way, although he's got good intellect, but he doesn't know how to use it. And he was a good debater, but he didn't do well in the debates against me, according to every poll. I mean, every poll, you know, just great debater, except he lost in every single poll and every single debate. So that takes care of the Heidi thing, because Heidi's a terrific woman, but they sent out. Now, he said, that was a PAC. We had nothing to do. Folks, a lot of us are political people, right? We're not babies. His people were on the PAC. So he said, we had nothing to do. We had this. Now, probably you could trace it down with emails, but they're pretty smart. They don't even send, probably just phone calls. But look, it was a PAC with many of his friends. It was a Cruz super PAC. I think he even said, well, it wasn't really meant for us. It was a Cruz PAC. It was his people. Okay, so they sent out the first picture. Please remember that. Number two, his father. I don't know his father. I met him once. I think he's a lovely guy. I think he's a lovely guy. All I did is point out the fact that on the cover of the National Enquirer, there was a picture of him and crazy Lee Harvey Oswald having breakfast. Now, Ted never denied that it was his father. Instead, he said, Donald Trump, I had nothing to do with it. This was a magazine that, frankly, in many respects, should be very respected. They got O.J., they got Edwards, they got this. I mean, if that was the New York Times, they would have gotten Pulitzer Prizes for their reporting. I've always said, why didn't the National Enquirer get the Pulitzer Prize for Edwards and O.J. Simpson and all of these things? But anyway, so they have a picture, an old picture, having breakfast with Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, I'm not saying anything. They said, and here's how the press takes that story. So this had nothing to do with me, except I might have pointed it out, but it had nothing to do with me. I have no control over anything. I might have pointed it out. But they never denied. Did anybody ever deny that it was the father? They're not saying, oh, that wasn't really my father. It's a little hard to do, because it looked like him. So here's the story. The press takes that and they say, Donald Trump and his conspiracy theories, he went out and said his father was with Lee Harvey Oswald and he assassinated the president. What did I do? So two things. Those were the 2 points. So on those 2 points, he said about the endorsement, and I just had it cleared up. I think I'm doing the right thing in doing it, but I have to do it. Number one, the Heidi thing you understand now. Number two, I know nothing about his father.
Well, believe it or not, the full release of all files related to the JFK assassination has been delayed yet again, this time until 2021. The president delayed the release in the name of national security, but it raises the question, what possible national security interest could be served at this point in protecting information about an assassination that occurred 55 years ago? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the author of American Values. He is, of course, the nephew of the slain president. He joins us tonight. It's such an odd... I've never done a segment on the assassination before, but I'm so struck by how weird this story is. The president has said point-blank a couple of times, I'm going to release all these files. He was convinced, for some reason, not to release them. What do you imagine that reason really was?
Well, I share your mystification. The stuff that's dribbling out, it is information that tends to connect the CIA to the assassination in one way or the other. I mean, the last one that they let out, what was it, in November? They let a batch out, and that showed that Charles Cavell, who was the mayor of Dallas at the time my uncle was assassinated, was actually a CIA operative and had been a CIA operative since 1956. And then there was also some information about the automobile that showed that the window had been replaced. Again, information that 50 years later, people should know about, people should have access to that kind of information, and it's bizarre that they still continue to sit on it.
Do you believe that the CIA or another government agency was in any way involved in the assassination of your uncle?
Well, I don't know. I don't think that possibility has been eliminated. A lot of people don't understand that when John Kennedy was killed, my father really was Attorney General. And so one of the defenses of the Warren Commission was, well, Bobby Kennedy was the best investigator of that era. He was like Mueller of that era. You know, he had been for 10 years, he'd been investigating the unions and the Teamsters and the mob. And so why wouldn't he investigate it? But the truth is, the day that his brother was killed, he lost all of the investigative capacity at the Department of Justice. He had 30,000 FBI agents who worked for him, but he never talked to J. Edgar Hoover again, not a single time after my Uncle Jack was killed. Oh, he really had no, because Hoover at that time began reporting directly to Johnson. And my father, who was ostensibly Hoover's boss, really lost control of the FBI and the investigative capacity of the Department of Justice, and he resigned soon afterward.
I just find the whole thing remarkable that the Attorney General of the United States, later a U.S. Senator, a person in a position to have a lot of information, would suspect his own CIA, and now the documents are still being withheld by that same agency. I think it's really fascinating. The book is American Values, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It is out, and we urge you to check it out. Bobby Kennedy, thanks very much for that. I appreciate it.
Here's some of what we learned from documents that were allowed to go public. In the aftermath of the assassination, the Soviets apparently worried they would be blamed for putting Lee Harvey Oswald up to the attack. More on that later. Also, the CIA once intercepted a phone call from Lee Harvey Oswald to the KGB's department in charge of sabotage and assassination before Oswald murdered the president. Another interesting item, a British newspaper received an anonymous phone call about, quote, big news in the U.S. 25 minutes before JFK was shot. So there actually was some big news in here, Kimberly.
You know, it's interesting because this is, I found, to be one of the more fascinating topics. Did you ever think in our, lifetime that they would reopen these files? And it's the question that I'm getting from everyone is, what are we going to find out? Are some things going to be held back? And I said, well, I think we're going to find out what they feel comfortable with us, knowing in terms of what transpired here. And I think it's an important moment in American political history and just in transparency for our government also, because a lot of times we'll say to other governments, what you guys are doing, you're not being transparent, you're not being open. And I think this shows that actually we trust the American people to know this information, even though this dealt with one of our top secret intelligence agencies. And to me, that's like kind of the most compelling aspect. I don't know that I necessarily found something in this that was earth-shattering or altered kind of my fact pattern or the chronology as a prosecutor of what I thought went down. But in that very sense, I think it's helpful because people were thinking there was a big conspiracy behind this and wondering what was going on and if our government was keeping secrets from us.
You can't get away from the Russians, Greg. The Russians, they keep coming up.
They're
in every
everywhere.
block in this show.
You know what I love about the Russians? They have a department in charge of sabotage and assassination. It is like they play the villain to a T. They'll put the sign up there and say, yeah, just go to the Department of Assassination and Sabotage. We have the cloaks over there, and the daggers are in the locker.
Terrible.
By the way, speaking of assassins, some of the best stuff here are the plots to kill Castro. This is the United States now. Contaminated skin diving suit, dusted with a deadly fungus inside. They were also going to booby trap what they called a spectacular seashell. So because Castro enjoyed diving, and they were going to put a shell that had bombs in it, but they couldn't find a large enough shell.
Shiny object.
I want this job. To sit around and come up with fantastic ideas, it's incredible. The only thing is that the problem with this, and I can see why some people are disappointed. It's like when you go to the carnival or a county fair and there's a sideshow and they go like, this is a bearded lady, and you're really excited as a 10-year-old, and it's just a guy in a dress.
And it pulls off.
Yeah, and or they say they always say like it's a monster rabbit, but it's like a goat with rabbit ears, and it's like so. I felt like we got led on a little bit. But my last point, Rachel Maddow just hammered Trump over this last night, saying how they couldn't get it right. She's been carnival barking for 9 months over Russian collusion with Trump, and there's more meat on a cricket than that story. So it's like she's essentially going after President Trump for what she's been doing every night from 9 to 10.
We're not clarifying a 60-year-old conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
That's basically that's exactly what happens every night. Jesse, you've done a lot of research on this today, and I wonder what your biggest takeaway was.
Well, we have a team of Waters World researchers going over this page by page, so I really don't want to speak
Investigating the
until we
Department of
know
Assassination.
the final decision that we've come to. It is funny off of Rachel Maddow how, the left fantasizes about assassinating President Trump, and then when he doesn't release things that might actually help other countries assassinate him through the CIA documents, now she's mad. So I don't know what
wait
to
a
make
minute.
of that.
That confused me.
I missed all.
She never said that.
No, isn't the left mad because Trump withheld some of the stuff because the CIA doesn't want any of their research and methodology?
Oh no, I was more confused. I was confused by the first part.
No.
Would you say?
I want to put repellent up. No.
Okay.
I was going to.
I absolutely followed everything that you were
Thank you,
saying.
Dana. It goes over some people's heads here.
Those are different documents exclusively obtained by Waters World.
Yeah, we're going to be releasing those documents later on the Waters World show on 8 o'clock on Saturday.
Well, and the other thing
big
is
seashells, big seashells.
President Trump was asked by the CIA, Richard, to hold some of these documents back, but he has, in 6 months, it will be revisited again. So we will be able to hold all of this information and bring it back up.
I don't understand. The Secret Service knew that he was going to do this, and they should have gotten their act together to release all the documents at one time.
Meaning President Trump or Lee Harvey Oswald?
No. I mean, no. See,
that would be another
Jesse's confused the whole table now. But no, I'm saying that the intelligence agencies knew the president wanted to release his documents. He sent the memo over there.
Well, it was required by the law. In 1992, the law said on October 26th, 2017, this will all be released.
Right.
Unless there's a security concern, which there was, and President Trump heeded it.
Right, and I feel as though that the Secret Service had almost a decade to get their act together and figure out the security concern and deal with it. And I applaud the president for releasing these documents because I think the American people deserve to know what happened to JFK. And I think now we can put all of these conspiracy theories to bed, the third bullet, the umbrella man, that LBJ did it. All of these conspiracy theories can now go to bed, and we can move on and say he was assassinated. We now all know. We know it was Lee Harvey Oswald, and now we know.
Well,
Bravo, Mr. President.
On the 2 o'clock show today, the Daily Briefing, so Jim Woolsey, the former CIA director, was there.
Yeah.
And basically what he said is that there is a theory about this guy who was a Romanian agent, and he defected to the United States, highest level guy. And he said that Khrushchev had wanted JFK assassinated. So there was a plan going forward, but then he called it off. But Lee Harvey Oswald was such a diehard believer that he went forward with it, and then they had Jack Ruby kill him to make sure that there was that you couldn't find that connection. You buy that, Kimberly?
I got to tell you something. For me, some of these theories I'd already heard before, you know, that weren't very revealing to me. And the Jack Ruby stuff I thought was kind of interesting. The other thing about going to get a confession in the hospital, I thought that was kind of interesting, but then really not able to do that was sort of a last-minute press to try to get that nugget to say, okay, we can wrap this up and close it down. History would have been very different, I think, if they had been able to obtain that. And then just the one other thing, Dana, that I found was really interesting was the phone call. There was an intercept of a phone call connecting, like we talked about the Russians. I mean, they're everywhere, between Oswald and then also a death threat against him. Those things were pretty interesting that I thought were new and kind of revealing.
I thought that Woolsey was making a lot of sense. Greg, what do you think about this British newspaper getting a warning 25 minutes before the news broke?
Sometimes I just think that is, you get a lot of chatter, I think, all the time, and you get that with terrorist attacks as well. So it may have just been a coincidence. I don't know who warned them. I don't know that part, but it's interesting when what you're getting is a look at what happens all the time, things that you don't know what's going on. When I go back to the Castro stuff, we were doing this too. We were planning to off, the head of a country because, because we didn't like him. And I look at this stuff and I go, this is really amazing. And we must be doing this now, or maybe we don't. But I wonder how many people have no idea what we're talking about because, it's 50 some odd, what is it, 60, how many years, where are we now? 53 years ago? 50 something?
Yes, 54.
Yeah. 54, yeah. So many humans spend so much time in fictitious worlds, playing video games that history is not as interesting.
It does also.
So let me ask you about your life. I look at your life. Your uncle is the President of the United States. Camelot. We all know so much about the presidency of your uncle, the short presidency of your uncle, and your father, the Attorney General at the time. And then your father makes a run for president. And like his brother, he was assassinated. You have suggested that you believe there was a conspiracy within our government, intelligence agencies, more specifically, you mentioned the CIA, and that you even believe yourself today, because of your last name, I'm assuming, that your life could be in jeopardy. Why do you believe that they were involved in the assassination of both your dad and your uncle, and maybe that you may be a target?
Well, I haven't said that I may be a target. People have asked me if I mean, there's always, for anybody who runs for president.
Anybody who's on Fox is a target, but go ahead.
So, I think I've taken a lot worse risks in my life than running for president. So
But it's also got to be hard. You lost your uncle, you lost your father. I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah, but what are you saying? Are you...
No, so why do you think that our government could be involved in this evidence?
Listen, when the Warren Commission, obviously, which was run by Alan Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, who my uncle fired, found that it was a lone shooter, which was Lee Harvey Oswald. But when Congress, a congressional committee, reinvestigated between 1977 and 1979 the House Select Assassinations Committee, they concluded, and they saw a lot more documentation and had a lot more witnesses than the Warren Commission ever saw. They concluded that my uncle was killed by a conspiracy. And most of the people, for example, Richard Schweitzer, who was the head of the committee, publicly said JFK, the President of the United States, that the CIA was involved in the murder of the President of the United States. And that's quotation. Most of the people on that committee at that time believed it was the CIA, that it was believed certain people in the CIA.
You were 7 at the time? 7 or 8?
I was 10 when my uncle was killed. I was 14 when my father was killed. And today there's overwhelming evidence. I mean, in fact,
why don't the government needs to release all of the files on it and let be transparent. Let us see the information.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. There's still, the law requires, there's a law that requires that all the records of John Kennedy's assassination be released to the public 10 years ago. So they're still holding 5,000 documents. President Biden promised when he was elected that he was going to release those documents. President Trump promised that he would. But the CIA doesn't want them to. And so the question that I think Americans have a right to ask, including members of, my father and uncle's family, is why not? What is it that you don't want to see 60 years later? And by the way, the last tranche of documents released had documentation in there that finally got even the New York Times to admit that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset, that he was working for the CIA. So, if the Warren Commission had known that back in 1964, they would have had a very different time. And the House Assassinations Committee never knew that. That was released. We've known that we've had documentation that have known that at least a decade. But some of that documentation became overwhelming in this last tranche. And finally, the mainstream media acknowledged that, yeah, he had this relationship with the CIA going back to 1957 or 1958.
We have a minute left in this hour. And I want to ask you this. You're talking to the American people tonight. Why should they vote for you for president? Tell them, in a 1 minute final statement.
I'm running on I think most Americans were at each other's throats today. We have the worst polarization that we've ever had since the American Civil War. It's more dangerous and more toxic.
Well, the 60s was a little crazy, too.
The 60s were, when my father ran, it was, there was a lot of division at that time. But it's hard to see how this is ever going to end well. And what I've said is I want to end that polarization, and I want to do that by telling the truth. The way that we're going to do that, the first step we have to take is to tell the truth. Have a president who's willing to tell the truth about everything. People in this country know that the system is rigged, and they know that they're being lied to. And
you look at Donald Trump and look at, for example, the way Hillary Clinton, top secret classified information, no prosecutor would ever prosecute, no raid at Chappaqua. You got 4 locations Joe Biden has top secret classified information. They didn't raid his home. Donald Trump, they raid Mar-a-Lago. And then the question is, in the 2020 election, for example, the FBI had Hunter's laptop in December of 2019. They verified its authenticity in March of 2020. Why was the FBI in the months leading up to that election meeting with big tech companies and telling big tech companies that they may be victims of misinformation campaigns and it may be about Joe or Hunter Biden when they knew damn well they'd already authenticated it? And what's interesting is the head of site integrity for Twitter at the time, Yoel Roth, actually testified in a Missouri case that, in fact, they said it might be about Hunter. And then none of these big tech companies allowed anybody to read the laptop story in the weeks leading up to that election. Now, to me, that is our government, in this case through the FBI, putting cinder blocks on a scale of an election. Is that something you would stop, and do you agree with me?
Yeah, I would stop. In fact, I'm going to issue an executive order the moment I get into the White House, the first day, forbidding of ending the weaponization of our agencies for political purposes.
It's worse than it's ever been. In my view, it's worse than it's ever been. And, one party will be in power, and then they'll start doing it to the other party. And it's going to be back and forth.
Of course. And this, Judge Doty's decision, which my name is, occurs on many, many, many pages of that because I was the first person censored by the Biden White House. The Biden administration, President Biden took the oath of office on January 21st, 2021. And the White House ordered Twitter to begin censoring me 37 hours later. I was the first name to be censored. And then 3 weeks after that, my Instagram account, which was my major way of talking to the public, was deplatformed and disappeared.
By the way, did you see at the censorship hearing, you got a great line when you said, I'm at a censorship hearing and you're censoring me. I mean, I thought that was pretty funny.
In your joint appearance on Friday, President Trump introduced you by saying that he plans to, if elected, establish a commission to declassify the remaining documents around your uncle's murder in 1963.
Yeah.
And I think everyone at this point knows the truth, which is the CIA is implicated in that. Those documents protect CIA, maybe among others.
Well, whether they do or not, I mean, it's odd that they've not allowed them to be released. 'Cause
what could possibly be the explanation?
More than 60 years after my uncle's death, almost 65 years. 62 years after his death. And none of the people who were implicated in that crime are alive now.
Yes.
And the last ones have died off in the last year or two. And so it clearly is to protect the institution.
Yes.
And that's wrong. It's just wrong. And it's wrong for a Democrat and it's wrong for Republicans.
It's just interesting, though, that a bipartisan list of presidents, these 6 decades, have kept those files classified.
Well, you and I have both. I was astonished that Trump didn't declassify them because he promised to during the campaign.
That was Mike Pompeo who did that.
Yeah, and that I talked to President Trump for the first time about that this week. And
what did he say?
He said that Mike Pompeo begged him to, and I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here.
No,
I think he told the same thing to you.
That's
right?
true.
But he said Mike Pompeo called him and said this would be a catastrophe to release these. You need to not do it. And then,
I want to say again, I think Mike Pompeo is a criminal. So that's my view. He's threatened to sue me for saying that, but I hope he will because it's true. But that kind of tells the whole story right there, right? That the CIA is.
Well, yeah. So that's
why would the CIA be trying to keep these files classified if they had nothing to do with the murder? I don't really get that.
Soon after I can't even believe I have to say this, nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania last month, Bobby called me to express his best wishes. He knows firsthand the risks incurred by leaders who stand up to the corrupt political establishment. When you stand up, you bring on some trouble for yourself, but you have to do what's right. You have to do what's right for the country. I will tell you, we are both in this to do what's right for the country. That's one thing I can tell you. He lost his father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated threats to his safety during the course of his campaign while being denied protection by the Harris-Biden administration. And this is a tribute in honor of Bobby. I am announcing tonight that upon my election, I will establish a new independent presidential commission on assassination attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And they will also conduct a rigorous review of the attack last month.
Today is the anniversary of your father's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And I'm wondering, looking back, how you think your views align or don't align with your dad's.
My view is that the issues that I believe in and the issues that I'm arguing about in this campaign against the war, about rebuilding the middle class, about protecting the Constitution and the First Amendment, about trying to achieve the American dream for every American, all of the issues that I feel strongly about are issues that my father also felt strongly about. I think my campaign is in many ways identical to his if you just went down the issues and checked the boxes. The same is true of President Kennedy, my uncle. So, but there may be people who disagree with me about that. And what Secretary Seward said when and President Lincoln died. He said he belongs to the ages now. So I know people have different opinions about what my father and my uncle would have stood for, but I've spent a lifetime studying their records, and understanding them because it's part of my own understanding of myself. And I'm very comfortable with their values. I feel great admiration for both of them for what they tried to do for our country. And I feel like, my life has been devoted to achieving those same objectives. I have the same vision for America as they did. 55 years ago last month, I sat as a 14-year-old boy behind my father as he announced his campaign for presidency of the United States. And the day he died, he won the California primary, the most urban state in this country, and the same day the South Dakota primary, the most rural. He had succeeded in uniting America. I was with my dad when he died in Los Angeles, and we brought him back to New York, and then we brought him from Penn Station in New York to Union Station in Washington, D.C. Normally that's a 2.5-hour train ride, and it took us 7.5 hours because there were 2 million people on the tracks. And that I will never forget as a 14-year-old boy what I saw from the windows of that train that day. In all of the urban train stations in Trenton and Newark and Philadelphia and Baltimore, they were crowded with black and white men singing the battle hymn of the Republic. My father, when he came back one time from the Delta, he said, we were all at the dinner table when he came in, and he said, I was in a tar paper shack today. It was smaller than this dining room, and there were 2 families living there, and the children get 1 meal a day. And when you get older, I want you to help those people. And when we would go into Southeast Washington or Appalachia, he would say to us, these are your people. These are Kennedy people. He said the other people, the big shots, the corporations, the millionaires don't need the Kennedys. They have lobbyists, they have PR firms, they have lawyers. And he said, these are your people, and these are the people you need to spend your life helping. And when I'm president, I'm going to be president for those people. We're going to really take back this country. You give me a piece of ground and a sword, and I am going to take back this country with your help, the help of all the homeless Republicans and Democrats and independents who are Americans first.
I'm sorry. I have to ask, sir. I have to ask one question, sir. When you got elected in the 2016 election, you said the first thing, or one of the things you wanted to do, was release the JFK file. And then you said later, I saw it and I wasn't really ready to do it. And then I saw a clip where you changed your mind and you said, I think we're ready to see this file. And I'm just curious.
What's in it?
Tell us right now. What happened? Like what?
Yeah. I actually did do it. I released a lot, as you know. But when it came to the whole thing, I was hit by some people that worked for me that are great people that you would respect. And they asked me not to do it. And I'm saying, why? Tell me why. And they said, sir, I think it needs a little more time. And I released a lot, but I said, if they feel so strongly, I respect the people and would have done that again. But this time, I'm just going to do it.
RFK says the CIA killed his uncle. Do you believe that?
Well, this wasn't CIA that asked me, but I think CIA was probably behind it. But they didn't. They would have preferred that I not release the rest of it. So we did give quite a bit. It's going to be done early on. A lot of people want to see that. And whatever it may say, I won't say. I sort of have an idea. But whatever it is, it'll be very interesting for people to see. And we're going to have to learn from it.
So if you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these. Yeah. Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about the way he died. It would be interesting to find out what happened there because that was a weird situation and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one. The other stuff I would definitely do the January 6th because, beyond all of them, because what happened, how about the Unselect Committee? They had meetings, they had all Democrats and 2 failed Republicans, right? Cheney and crying Adam Kinzinger. See, Biden couldn't do this interview. Do you think he'd remember crying Adam Kinzinger? Do you think he'd remember all these different names, these different folks? And I didn't know you were going to be talking about this. But can you imagine? The whole thing is crazy what we're doing.
When I think about my father and my uncle, I think that it wasn't their death so much that affected me, but their lives, their approach to life, and and I've spent a lot of my life not only with them, but then reading all the literature on them. I'm probably the only person in my family that's done that, and written histories about it, and sort of dissected their views on various issues, and that's affected me tremendously. In terms of the trauma, it's hard for me to just think, I was a drug addict for 14 years, and my addiction started right after my dad's death. But in my construction of events, I don't blame my father's death on my addiction. I feel like I was born like that I was born with an empty hole inside of me, and that I was looking for ways to fill it, things outside of me to fill it, and that's what addicts do. And
do other people in your life feel that way? Because we don't know, but you could imagine a friend or a partner or a doctor saying if the events occurred right after, they might see the link.
Well, of course, and I have no way of really of making that determination. So, I spend a lot of time in self-examination. I've been in recovery for 40 years. I go to meetings every day, and that's a process of constant self-examination. So, in my I've come down on the side that, that trauma clearly affects things about, I'm sure, how I process the world. But I don't, looking back on that does not help me in terms of, how do I negotiate what I need to do today? And I think when the parts of my life that are most influential in determining how I behave on a day-to-day basis, how I get out of, bed in the morning, make my bed, and, go about, be kind to people, and be judicious, and be, the way that I approach the world, I think is much more influenced by the role model that my father gave me, the role model that my uncle gave me, rather than the way they died. So I think, the answer to your question is I don't really know how that trauma impacted me. I can't really separate that from, many other traumas I've had, and we all have, everybody has trauma. But I do know that my uncle and my father's lives, the way they lived them, the choices they made, the moral center that they had, has affected me profoundly.
Good morning.
Good
How
morning.
are you? Thanks for joining us on the Monday Morning Show. And most of you sitting through the city with 1.25 inches of rain.
Inch and a quarter?
1.25 inches. That was the rainfall total for the park. Walk over to the wall. We'll show you what it looks like. This shot showing you lower Manhattan. And everything is actually in pretty good shape now as we work into clear. But for us, bright sunny skies, 65 degrees at 7 o'clock in the morning, and sunny and pleasant for the rest of the day, 80 degrees. It's kind of a guilty pleasure as beautiful as this weather is going to be. The 5-day, look at this, 78 degrees on Wednesday. Thursday, I think I'm even overdone with the clouds there. I think it turns out to be a little bit nicer. Friday, very nice. Saturday, beautiful, cool, pleasant days.
I had one.
BuzzFeed dug up an old quote from Donald Trump talking about a large-scale terror attack 19 months before 9/11. In his 2000 book, The America We Deserve, Trump wrote, "I really am convinced we're in danger of the sort of terrorist attacks that will make the bombing of the 1993 Trade Center look like little kids playing with firecrackers." Trump also mentioned the mastermind of the attack, writing, quote, "One day, we're told that a shadowy figure with no fixed address named Osama bin Laden is public enemy number one, and U.S. jet fighters lay waste to his camp in Afghanistan. He escapes back under some rock, and a few news cycles later, it's on to a new enemy and a new crisis."
We are having some technical difficulties, which is totally understandable when you try to do ad hoc reporting and getting information to you as fast as we possibly can and making sure that it's accurate at the same time. So
Donald Trump is on the line. I mean, we know him as the man behind lots of real estate in Manhattan. And of course, Donald, I understand you were actually a witness to what happened this morning.
Well, I have a window that looks directly at the World Trade Center, and I saw this huge explosion. I was with a group of people, and I really couldn't even believe it. And even, I think, worse than that, for years I've looked right directly at the building. I'd see the Empire State Building in the foreground and the World Trade Center in the background, and now I'm looking at absolutely nothing. It's just gone, and it's just hard to believe.
Donald, Alan Marcus here. Your building is, the Trump Tower, is one of the great tourist attractions in the world. It's well known universally. Are you taking any precautions there in light of what happened at the World Trade Center?
Well, Alan, we've always had, as you know, very, very strong security, but there's very little you can do about planes crashing into a building. I mean, you look at Larry Silverstein, who's a terrific owner in New York and a very good friend of mine who I just called. I was very worried about him, because I assume maybe he was in the building. He took possession of the building 1 week ago. As you know, he just bought the World Trade Center.
Right.
And he was in his office, and he was getting ready to move into the World Trade Center over the next 2 weeks. So when I just spoke to him, there's nothing you can do when people are going to be bombing planes at your building. Now, Donald, I guess maybe the world is going to be changing, and maybe you're going to have F-16s flying all over the city, etc. But it's a pretty tough situation.
Donald, you have one of the landmark buildings down in the financial district, 40 Wall Street. Did you have any damage, or did you know what's happened down there?
Well, it was an amazing phone call I made. 40 Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest. And I just spoke to my people, and they said it's the most unbelievable sight. It's probably 7 or 8 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and yet Wall Street is littered with 2 feet of stone and brick and mortar and steel, and there are thousands of people walking over the debris over the Brooklyn Bridge, where they're sending them out over the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn, and then I guess they're going to have to figure out how to get home from there. But they have between 1 foot and 2 feet of debris right in front of a building that's probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away.
Donald, this is Roland Smith.
Hi, Roland.
You know, how you doing on this kind of day? You know, at some point, we're going to put all this behind us. And you, as a visionary, particularly in New York real estate, what do you think that we ought to do as a city, as a people, when all of this gets, when the mourning stops, when the dead are honored, and we've found out what caused it and maybe corrected it? What does the city need to do?
Well, I guess the big thing that you really will have to do is never forget. You just can't forget that something like this happened. I was so disappointed when they closed the stock exchange, but of course, at some point, you had no choice, you know, when they initially announced it was closing, because you want to just say, the hell with it, you're going forward, nothing's going to change. But the fact is, something has changed very dramatically. And I think one of the very sad things is going to be when you look at the skyline of New York, which has become so emblazoned in your own memory, and you look at the skyline of New York and you see these buildings, these 2 buildings, whether you love them or don't love them, they were a great part of the skyline. And then when you look at the skyline after 2001, and you're going to see a skyline without these 2 buildings, you're going to say, what happened? People won't believe it. You know, when you show your children or your grandchildren in years to come what New York looked like in the year 2000, and then what New York looked like just a year later, they're going to say, what happened?
Hey, Donald,
it's hard to believe.
in the year 2000, Donald, you considered running for president. If you had done that and if you had been successful, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Well, I'd be taking a very, very tough line, Alan. I mean, most people feel they know at least approximately the group of people that did this and where they are. But boy, would you have to take a hard line on this. This just can't be tolerated, and it's got to be very, very stern. This is, as you and I were discussing before, Alan, this was probably worse than Pearl Harbor. Many more people are dead, and they don't know, they have no idea, but I have somebody that was down there who witnessed at least 10 people jumping out of the building from 70 and 80 stories up in the air. I mean, you probably have 25 or 30,000 is the number I've heard, but I would think would be much more than that. I think the most of the damage will be caused not by even in the building in terms of the people dead, but by the people on the streets from falling debris.
Donald, you're probably the best known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. The World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation. And it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
Donald, one last question for you. Given the magnitude of how much of American commerce took place within the Twin Towers, what do you, as you're an expert on this, what do you think is going to be the fallout over the next several weeks, months, and even years, given what we have lost in terms of those buildings going down and all that was within it?
Well, I, as an example, Alan, and you might use them too, but I have an insurance company that was on the 102nd floor of the World Trade Center. They're gone. I don't know who's gone. I don't know anything other than their offices are no longer there. They're wiped out. The Morgan Stanley Group, Morgan Stanley, a big, powerful firm, they had 50 stories in the building, gone. I mean, you're talking about some firms that are just gone. Now, Morgan Stanley, in that case, had a lot of its offices in Midtown, and they had about half downtown. Morgan Stanley's a big, powerful firm. They're gone. Many firms had all of their offices, as you know, in the World Trade Center. It was 8 million square feet. 8 million square feet is the size of some cities. And we had 8 million square feet in the world, 4 million in each building. They were huge buildings, not only in height, but each floor was 50,000 feet. They were monstrous floors. Each floor was almost a city in itself, and they had 110 floors or so. So, many firms that were easily recognizable for those of us in the financial world, for those of us that read the papers and see the financial pages, they're going to be gone. I mean, they're just not going to exist anymore. They're gone.
Donald Trump.
Many of the people are gone with them.
Donald Trump, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you all.
We really
Good luck.
appreciate it. Thank you. Same to you.
You too.
Our prayers are with everyone.
Ja, guten Abend nach Berlin. Wir stehen hier ungefähr 4 Blocks vom World Trade Center entfernt, oder das, was davon übrig geblieben ist. Und neben mir steht Donald Trump. Donald Trump hat selber einige Gebäude in der Gegend. Ich werde ihn kurz dazu befragen. Mr. Trump, do you have any interest in the area down there that has been affected?
I have a lot of property down there, but it was unfortunately affected by what happened to the World Trade Center.
Ich habe eine Menge Gebäude dort unten, aber Gott sei Dank ist es von diesem Terroranschlag nicht in Mitleidenschaft gezogen worden. What's your biggest fear, Mr. Trump?
Well, I just went to what they call ground zero. I've never seen anything like it. The devastation, the human life that's been just wasted for no reason whatsoever. It is a terrible scene. It's a terrible sight. But New York is a very strong and resilient, and they'll rebuild quickly.
Ich habe noch nie so eine Verwüstung gesehen, ich habe noch nie so eine Verwüstung menschlichen Lebens gesehen, eine Verschwendung menschlichen Lebens, aber New York wird damit fertig werden mit so einem Terroranschlag. Mr. Trump, what should be the response to this attack? How should the U.S. respond to such a devastating?
Well, I think they have to respond quickly and effectively. They have to find out exactly what the cause was, who did it, and they have to go after these people because there is no other choice. And then secondarily, and much less importantly, we have to rebuild in some form that will be just as majestic as the World Trade Center.
Also die USA müssen auf diese Verwüstung, auf diesen Terroranschlag so deutlich wie möglich und so schnell wie möglich antworten. Und vor allen Dingen sagt er, wir werden wieder ein Gebäude bauen, was noch majestätischer ist als das World Trade Center. Will you be involved? Will you take any efforts, any steps to reconstruct the area?
Well, I have a lot of men down here right now. We have over 100, and we have about 125 coming. So we'll have a couple of hundred people down here. And they're very brave, and what they're doing is amazing. And we will be involved in some form in helping to reconstruct.
Ich habe ihn gefragt, wird er mithelfen, diese Gegend wieder aufzubauen? Der sagt, er hat einige 100 Leute bereits dort und es ist erstaunlich, was sie bereits geleistet haben. What kind of cost would you estimate to rebuild this area? How much money has been lost in the attack?
I would say $15 to $20 billion. You're talking billions and billions of dollars, and it's irreparable. But I really feel that the location is such and the importance of the monument is such that we have to rebuild. And again, not necessarily in the form of the two towers, but something has to be done that's very big and very majestic.
Er sagt, ich habe ihn gefragt, wie viel wird es kosten, diese Gegend wieder aufzubauen. Er sagt, es wird Milliarden kosten, zweistellige Milliardenbeträge. Aber wir sollten es nicht so aufbauen wie das World Trade Center mit diesen beiden Türmen, sondern eine andere Form finden, etwas gleichsam Majestätisches. A lot of people ask, how is it possible that a Boeing plane would be able to destroy or two planes would be able to destroy the Twin Towers? Because they were constructed to withstand like a 707 attack.
Well, it's tremendous power and tremendous heat, and people were willing to die, and when they're willing to die and when they're willing to become kamikazes of a sense, there's very little you can do about it. I mean, the heat and the power, actually it was amazing that the initial jolts didn't jar the building as much as people would have thought. But the tremendous amounts of fuel that was dumped on the building and 1,600 degrees temperature, I guess that's probably more than anything could take, no matter what.
Ich habe ihn gefragt, wie kann es denn passieren, dass diese Gebäude von einem Flugzeug zerstört werden? Die Twin Towers waren gebaut worden, um auch dem Ansturm einer Boeing zu widerstehen. Er sagt, es ist die unglaubliche Hitze, die sich entwickelt hat, die Aufschlagkraft, das Benzin, was diese Gebäude zu Fall gebracht hat. Man kann gegen solche Dinge nichts tun. When do you think we will start to rebuild?
Well, I would hope it would really be very quickly. A lot of great genius people in the city, and I think that within a shorter period of time than first we have to get rid of what's there, and we have to save as many lives as possible, if that is possible. Today they found 5 people under the rubble, which is amazing, alive. But after that process takes place, I think they can start thinking about rebuilding, absolutely.
Ich habe ihn gefragt, wann werden die Wiederaufbauarbeiten beginnen. Er sagt, wir müssen erst natürlich das Leben retten und diese ganzen Aufräumarbeiten vonstatten bringen und dann gleich beginnen, wieder aufzubauen. Vielen Dank, Mr. Trump.
Danke.
Thanks a lot.
Danke.
Ja, danke.
Now, just a few moments ago, Donald Trump passed through here, so we had a minute to talk with him. Let's roll that tape. You can see what he had to say.
Well, I've never seen anything like it. I've seen two huge 110-story buildings that are reduced to rubble, thousands and thousands of lives. I just got to see something that I've never seen before. I have hundreds of men inside working right now, and we're bringing down another 125 in a little while, and they've never done work like this before. And they're hardworking people, but they've never seen anything like it, and they've never done work like this before. It's terrible.
Tell me what it's like at Ground Zero. Tell me about the workers that you saw and what they're doing there.
Well, not only is it devastation, but it's very dangerous because every few minutes a whistle would go off and everybody would just run because you have all the buildings around it, which are in such a weakened state that people just don't know. And so they just have to take off. And then they come back and they're working under 50-story buildings that you don't know if they're going to fall down. So it's a terrible thing for the workers, and it's a terrible thing for the world, really.
How have you spoken to any of your men? Do you know how they're reacting to this? Because emotionally, this must be so incredibly difficult.
Well, there are a lot of them, but they've never seen bodies like this. I mean, the bodies all over. The great thing is when they find somebody that's alive, like the 5 firemen that they just found a little while ago. So that's the great thing, and that's what they're all striving for. But generally speaking, that's not the case. That's not the case. So they are working very, very hard, but it's a very depressing situation for these folks.
As you walked around and as you saw the piles of rubble, there are thousands of families out there who are hoping that someone might be in a pocket somewhere, still alive, still breathing, waiting to be dug up. As you assessed that damage from your perspective, do you believe that's possible?
Well, I would certainly not want to be the one to say it's not possible. Certainly it's a tough situation, but you can't give up hope because there's always hope. I mean, the 5 men, I'm sure their families thought that they probably were gone, and now they walk in the door. A couple of them walked away after they were dug out. So there probably are some more people in there, and therefore you can't give up hope.
You've had an impact on the skyline of New York. What is it like as you see it now?
It's like a whole different skyline. It's like a whole different city and world. I cannot believe the sight of Lower Manhattan without the World Trade Center, and therefore we have to rebuild, not necessarily in that form, but we have to rebuild at least as good and maybe better.
Just finally, can you tell me emotionally as you walked around, we've heard some of the stories from the firemen. They're so exhausted and mentally and physically. What was it like for you personally to go in and see all of what you saw?
Well, it was amazing to see it. It was a very depressing scene, but I'll tell you what, you really can take heart. These firemen and policemen and the construction workers equally, the courage they have is unbelievable. I mean, they're working, digging out and lifting up steel, and above them you have 55-story buildings that are very possibly going to be pouring down on them any minute, and they're working like nothing's wrong. I mean, they're amazing.
It shouldn't be a commercial development. It really should just be a park. Just grass, trees, a place for meditation. He really isn't interested in that kind of thing, I don't think.
Good morning. Welcome to Trump Tower. It's an honor to have all of you with us. If we rebuild the World Trade Center in the form of a skeleton, Freedom Tower, the terrorists win. We want to rebuild the World Trade Center as the World Trade Center, but better, a little bit taller, a lot stronger, just plain better.
Cool. That's it.
I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering. So something's going on. We got to find out what it is. I do want surveillance. I will absolutely take database on the people coming in from Syria if we can't stop it, but we're going to. And if I win, I've made it known, if I win, they're going back. We can't have them. They're going back. We can't have them. We can't have them.
Donald Trump is doubling down on claims he made over the weekend that he saw thousands of Muslim Americans in New Jersey celebrating after the September 11th terror attacks. Trump first made the remarks at a rally Saturday and then stood by them Monday night at an event in Columbus, Ohio.
During a speech recently, I said that I saw in parts of New Jersey, Jersey City, but parts of New Jersey, I saw people getting together and in fairly large numbers celebrating as the World Trade Center was coming down, killing thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people. People are still dying over what happened to the World Trade Center, and they're dying a terrible death. And I saw people, and I saw them on television, and I read about it on the internet, and I read about it. So they said, oh, we can't find anything, Mr. Trump. The reporters are calling all day, all night. They want to find out, did Trump make a mistake? So I have some good people. And they checked and they checked. And believe me, it's being cleared off, plenty of stuff. They don't like that, because that's not good for the liberal cause, right? But they don't like it. And lo and behold, I start getting phone calls in my office by the hundreds that they were there and they saw this take place. People. So one of my people comes in. This is a story from the Washington Post on September 18th, a week later, 2001. In Jersey City, within hours of two jetliners plowing into the World Trade Center, law enforcement authorities detained and questioned a number of people who were allegedly seen celebrating the attacks and holding tailgate style. Tailgate, you know what that means? Tailgate. That means football games, Ohio State, thousands of people in parking lots, on roofs. Tailgate is a lot of people. Tailgate's not two people. And holding tailgate-style parties on rooftops while they watched the devastation on the other side of the river. Okay? Washington Post. Washington Post. So they've come in, and we've received hundreds of phone calls in my office because it's become sort of a big subject. And they want to try and deny it, but you can't deny it. Many people in this room heard about it, probably saw it. And, you know, the sad part is we're all sort of on the same side. Whether you're liberal or conservative or Democrat or Republican, we're sort of on the same. We want our country to be great again. That's what the whole thing is, right? It really doesn't make sense. But fortunately, somebody in the Washington Post wrote that, and they'll try and deny it. They'll probably say, well, we made a mistake, which I almost like that better. Then I could show you how dishonest they all are. I might like that better. Let them say that. But they'll find some reason to deny it. They'll call it a typo. It was about it was a very long and winding typo. but they'll try and deny it. But I don't think they'll be able to. Not with the smart people, they're not going to be able to.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Continuing now with Donald Trump. As you may know, he said that he saw thousands of Muslims in New Jersey celebrating after the 9/11 attack. We investigated and came up with a very interesting report from WCBS TV 5 days after 9/11.
Is another apartment building, one that investigators told me, quote, is swarming with suspects. Suspects who I'm told were cheering on the roof when they saw the plane slam into the Trade Center. Now, police were called to the building by other neighbors and found 8 men celebrating, 6 of them tenants in the building. The FBI and other terrorist task force agencies then arrived, and the older investigators on the task force recalled that they had been to this building before, 8 years ago, when the first World Trade Center attack led them to Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, whose Jersey City mosque lies between the 2 buildings getting attention today.
Now, I played that report from Mr. Trump yesterday while telling him we could find no other videotape germane to the issue. So no videotape about, thousands of people celebrating doesn't exist, and we really looked everywhere. I mean, it's just not there. But there were people celebrating. Mayor Giuliani confirms in New York it happened. Mr. Guzman confirms in Jersey it happened. So does the Jersey State Police. So you were wrong by saying thousands, but it did happen. What say you?
Well, I don't know that I'm wrong, Bill. This just came out from Breitbart. Literally, it just came out. Trump vindicated, 100% vindicated. And this literally, I'm just seeing it now. So I don't know that I'm wrong. There are a lot of people. We don't have cell phones today with the cameras on them. I mean, if we did, I think you'd see something a lot different. You look at what happened recently, a week ago, with the soccer game, where they had a minute of silence for the people that were just absolutely... It was horrible what happened in Paris, and they had honoring those people, a minute of silence, and you heard shouts from the Muslim world at the game that were horrendous. The players were embarrassed, the coaches were embarrassed.
Do you remember what country that was?
Excuse me?
Do you remember what country that was?
It was a different country.
It was Turkey.
That was a different country. But I'm just saying,
okay.
It was Turkey. I'm just saying, there's great hatred out there. There's tremendous hatred out there.
Nobody's disputing that.
And people aren't acknowledging it.
Where you get into trouble, with all due respect, of course, is what you give a speech and you say things like, I saw thousands, and there weren't thousands. Now,
but you don't know that there weren't, Bill. Bill, you don't know what there was.
I was reporting, and believe me, if there were thousands, that would have been reported. But what I'm trying to get at is
they were swarming. Bill, this article says they were swarming all over the place.
Right.
So I don't know what that means, but it means a lot of people.
There were some people, not thousands. Now, but what I want to get at is this. You're giving a speech tonight in Virginia.
Bill, you don't know that.
I'm pretty confident.
All right, you're pretty sure.
Right.
You're pretty sure. You don't know that,
and
Bill.
you know that
this
I'm always right.
Swarming all over New Jersey.
I'm always right. So, take it to the bank.
Okay.
All right. So you go to Virginia, and you give a speech tonight, okay? Do you have that speech printed out, or is it an ad-lib speech?
Well, it would be so much easier to just read off a teleprompter like our president does, where he reads a teleprompter because he can't do anything else. I like to not do that. I have thousands of people. The other night we had 15,000 people. We had 12,000 people.
Right.
I like to do extemporaneous. Right? You know why? Right. It's more exciting.
And it's more.
And you know the other thing about it?
But you get into trouble.
The other thing about I can talk about current events. I can talk about things that took place 2 hours ago. I can talk about a soccer game if it was played and people were screaming horrible things and it took place an hour before I go up. And frankly, it's much more exciting to speak for the people, for everybody, even for me. But
I understand
now,
that.
To do that, you need an extraordinary memory and you need lots of ability to be able to speak in front of 20,000 people without a speech.
And you have that.
I think it's much better.
But here's what happens. Sometimes when you're up there, you get overly excited and you're speaking extemporaneously, and then you say things as anybody would, because the crowd is cheering and everything's going wild, that you don't know to be true, but you believe to be true, but you don't know it. So that's the risk as a president, all right? When you're out there as a man who wants the most powerful position in the world, you got to kind of be careful in those speeches, because that's what gets you in trouble. Do you get my point?
I would love to read speeches off of a teleprompter. It is so easy to do. I would even love to read speeches, period. But you know what? You don't get the same excitement. You don't get the same feeling. And I haven't made very many mistakes, that I can tell you. You know, when I announced and when I talked about illegal immigration, all of a sudden everyone, I mean, the world went crazy and thought it was terrible. 4 weeks later, I was #1 in the polls because everyone realized I was right. In fact, it was about 1 week later. But I was #1 in the polls, and now I'm #1 in every single poll. A big one, you'll hate to hear this, but a big one's coming out, CNN tomorrow. I don't know how it's going to be, but I look forward to that one. But we're #1 in every poll, including the Fox poll, very important.
But I'm just saying that
and we beat Hillary. By the way, Bill, and we beat Hillary head-to-head.
And I'm sure she's thrilled for that. With responsibility,
She's thrilled.
okay, with the responsibility that you're seeking comes personal responsibility. And when you say something, you got to be pretty damn well sure that it's accurate and it's not hyperbole. That's the point I'm trying to make, and I'm sure you understand. But
I've had very few complaints, Bill. I've had very few complaints, and we get the biggest crowds by many, many times, and we get far bigger crowds than anybody else.
That's because you're so charismatic.
We have a great, you know what? We have a great time with a tough subject because there's not a lot of good news happening with the United States. You understand that better than anybody. So we have a great time, as good a time as you can have, with subject matter that's not so pleasant.
Always very fascinating to talk with you, Donald, and we always appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Next to the race for 2016 tonight, Donald Trump and what he said today about 9/11, about the World Trade Center, and former President George W. Bush. Those words drawing a quick response from Jeb Bush at this hour. ABC's Tom Llamas on the campaign trail.
Tonight, Donald Trump making a bold accusation against former President George W. Bush, implying Bush is to blame for 9/11.
When you talk about George Bush, I mean, say what you want, the World Trade Center came down during his time. If you look at Sandy Hook,
you can't blame George Bush for that.
He was president, okay? Don't blame him or don't blame him, but he was president. The World Trade Center came down during his reign.
The comments made during an interview with Bloomberg TV after Trump was asked if he had the compassion to handle crises like 9/11 or the Sandy Hook shooting.
Help us understand who Donald Trump is as a man. I need to know that you will make us feel safe and you will make us feel proud.
I think I have a bigger heart than all of them. I think I'm much more competent than all of them.
Trump has repeatedly called President Bush a disaster, but never going this far. Rival Jeb Bush tonight firing back on Twitter, tweeting, "How pathetic for Donald Trump to criticize the president for 9/11. We were attacked and my brother kept us safe." So Bush and Trump back at it. And David, last night we had reported how Trump and Dr. Ben Carson were threatening to boycott the next debate because they said it was going to be too long. Well, tonight, CNBC, the host of that debate, has agreed to Carson and Trump's terms. The debate will now be 2 hours. David?
All right, the debate moves on. Tom Llamas tonight. Tom, thank you.
Look, when somebody attacks me like Jeb at one of the debates, and I was very nice to him at the Ronald Reagan. I didn't say it. I didn't want to say it. But he talked about the tremendous safety. Well, excuse me, the World Trade Center came down during the, reign of George Bush, right? I mean, it came down. So during the Ronald Reagan, if you remember the library debate, he mentioned about how we were safe. We weren't safe. That was the greatest attack in the history of the United States, worse than Pearl Harbor because it was individuals. We were attacked as individuals as opposed to the military. The greatest single attack. So what he's saying, and I'm standing up there, I'm saying, do I want to embarrass him by saying this? But because I'm a nice person, I didn't do it. But then when he used it another time, I had to say, I'm sorry, but we weren't safe. The World Trade Center came down, which was the greatest attack in history on this country. So you had that. You obviously had the war, which was a big mistake. I mean, I think few people would say the war in Iraq was a positive. You had him on the aircraft carrier saying all sorts of wonderful things, how the war was essentially over. Guess what? Not over. And, the war with Iraq is a disaster. Now Iran is taking over Iraq, as sure as you're sitting there. They're taking the oil. They're taking everything. I said take the oil. I was against the war in Iraq, by the way. I was the only one on the stage. Believe me, you should get some points for vision. But I was totally against the war in Iraq. I said it's going to destabilize the Middle East. And then when they went in, I said when they're getting out, take the oil. They didn't take the oil. So now Iran is going to have the oil and ISIS has the oil. And ISIS, this has fueled ISIS because ISIS now has so much money because they've had the oil.
On Monday, George W. Bush will campaign in South Carolina for his brother. As you said tonight, and you've often said, the Iraq War and your opposition to it was a sign of your good judgment. In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing, close quote. When you were asked what you meant by that, you said, for the war. For the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should have been impeached?
First of all, I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder. I have my wife and I have my son. That's all I have. I don't have this. So let me just tell you, I get along with everybody, which is my obligation to my company, to myself, etc. Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say, and he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush. When a member on the stage's brother gets attacked, the brother gets to respond.
Do I get to do it 5 or 6 times or just once
nice.
responding to that? So here's the deal. I'm sick and tired of Barack Obama blaming my brother for all of the problems that he's had. And frankly, I could care less about the insults that Donald Trump gives to me. It's blood sport for him. He enjoys it, and I'm glad he's happy about it. But I am sick and tired of him going after my family. My dad is the greatest man alive in my mind. And while Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did. And he's had the gall to go after my mother.
The World Trade Center came down during your brother's reign.
He's had the gall to go after my mother.
Remember that.
Hold on.
Let me finish this. He's had the gall to go after my mother.
That's not keeping
I
us
won
safe.
the lottery when I was born 63 years ago and looked up and I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
not about my family or his family.
Okay.
This is about the South Carolina families that need someone to be a commander-in-chief that can lead. I'm that person.
Governor Kasich, would you weigh in on?
The White House is coming to the First Lady's defense today over a wardrobe flap that many say is a total cheap shot. Conspiracy theorists on Twitter noticed something unusual about the stitching on a coat Melania once wore at a 9/11 memorial service. Is that a plane crashing into one of the Twin Towers in the back of Melania's coat? Goes this comment. It legit looks like an object is flying into a tower. The story was picked up by USA Today and Yahoo News. The First Lady wore the coat at a 9/11 ceremony in Shanksville, Pennsylvania last year. It's coming to light now because the White House posted the image yesterday with the caption, "We will never forget." Now, her critics are calling her insensitive, saying it's the second time one of her jackets has raised eyebrows. Remember, I really don't care, do you? Professor Tammy Vigil wrote the new book, Melania and Michelle, First Ladies in a New Era. I asked her why Melania gets so much bad press. Do you think Melania is getting a fair shake?
A lot of the response to Melania Trump is sort of people's response to her husband. And that's not really fair for her.
She says Michelle Obama had her critics too. It comes with the job.
Every First Lady is usually given a really raw deal. So I think she's gotten the same raw deal.
Look closer at the stitching. That's not a plane, it's a button. No conspiracy here, folks. Now, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham is calling the coat flap conspiracy ridiculous.
very much. How are you? It's a sad day. It's a very sad day for a lot of reasons. And we just added to that reason last week, because that should have never been allowed to happen, I have to say. And I've watched all the speeches and nobody mentions it, what they did, but we're going to have to live with that for a period of time. Very disappointing, but incredible job you do. I grew up with you, and you are New York's finest. You're incredible people. I know many of you, and I appreciated during the election, the New York City Police endorsed Trump. You know that, right? First time they've ever endorsed a candidate. They told me, first time, maybe they do it every time, I don't know, but they told me, first time they've ever endorsed a candidate for president, and it's a great honor. No one who lived through the horror of the September 11th terrorist attacks can ever forget the agony and the anguish of that terrible day. It was a terrible day. The images of dark plumes of smoke billowing over lower Manhattan, the Pentagon, and a field of Pennsylvania, such a beautiful field, are seared into our minds forever. We will never forget. Today, on this solemn anniversary of those monstrous attacks, we remember the 2,977 precious souls who were savagely taken from us on that morning 22 years ago, leaving a void that can never be filled, No matter what happens, it can never be filled. We will say a prayer for each of the beautiful families they left behind, whose pain is beyond comprehension. What they've gone through is not even believable. We honor the firefighters, the great New York PD, the police department, what great people they are. They are so great. And the Port Authority officers, the Virginia, D.C., and Pentagon police, and the military service members and other first responders, actually all over the country. They acted with supreme heroism, and they went to the site of the most heinous crime. They would leave other states far away and go to the World Trade Center site, the Pentagon. They'd go to Pennsylvania, who in many cases gave their lives in the line of duty. God bless the memory of all of those who perished in the 9/11 attacks. We will never, ever forget. We will never forget you. We love you. God bless their families, and God bless America. Thank you.
I don't know what you're talking about, 9/11. I don't recall saying anything about 9/11.
It came out of the Bergen interview.
I'm called a conspiracy.
Came out of, you know what I'm talking about. It came out of the Bergen interview.
I do not know.
Well, in the Bergen interview where you were saying you're not sure what happened. You know what I'm talking about, Bobby. I'm not, you know me. I'm not trying to be sneaky about it.
You mentioned 9/11. The official explanation of 9/11 you buy?
Which is what?
Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11.
I don't know what happened on 9/11. I mean, I understand what the official explanation is. I understand that there is dissent. I have not looked into it. I haven't examined it. I'm not a good person to talk to about it.
Well, I mean, so there's doubt in your mind that Al-Qaeda was responsible?
Well, I don't know. I know that there's strange things that happen that don't seem...
What are the strange things?
Well, one of the buildings came down that wasn't hit by a plane. So, it was Building 7 or Building 10.
That collapsed because two of the world's biggest buildings collapsed on top of it.
No, they didn't collapse on top of it. My offices were down there. My offices were closed.
So one of the buildings next to the Trade Center...
No, there's pictures of it collapsing. There's nothing collapsing on top of it. I mean, listen, I don't want to argue any theories about this because all I've heard is questions. I have no explanation. I have no knowledge of it. But what you're repeating now, I know not to be true.
To clarify, yes, I could have been more precise here. The government's official report found that Building 7 was hit with debris from the North Tower. That impact caused fires, which led to the building collapse. It's very well documented, and there's nothing strange about it.
I'm not trying to be coy, Chris. I think if you go back and look at that interview or any interview, I never voiced a conspiracy theorist. I may say, I don't know what the facts are, or, I'm willing to question government orthodoxies, but I never advanced a theory about what happened on 9/11. I can tell you that.
On 9/11, here was my concern about it. After after you did the Bergen interview, when people started to process it, they said, hey, you know, you are having Bobby Kennedy on, and he says he doesn't know what happened on 9/11. I went back and I read the whole transcript of the interview. I believe that that's not a fair reading. You did say, I don't know what happened on 9/11, but I do understand the government's reckoning of it, and I don't have any reason to not believe it. Is that what you're saying, or are you saying that you don't know whether you believe what the government says happened on 9/11? This matters.
Well, I don't, you know, listen, I've been around long enough that I question everything that the government tells me. And I think people who don't question what the government tells them are not paying attention. You know, when I was a kid, the government didn't lie to us. And 80% of Americans in 1960 believed that the government didn't lie to us. And then a lot of things happening. One, my uncle's assassination.
Right.
And, you know, the Warren Commission report, which a subsequent congressional investigation came to a completely different conclusion than the Warren Commission report, a congressional investigation that was much more thorough. Then the Pentagon Papers came out in 1973 and showed that the government had systematically lied to us about the war in Vietnam. And since that time, I think you and I grew up in an era, Chris, where we expect the government to lie to us. So I think part of being a citizen in a democracy is to question authority, to question everything. Trust in the experts is not a feature of science, and it's not a feature of democracy. It is a feature of totalitarianism, and it's a feature of religion. But we live in a democracy, and it's science. Our policies have to be science-based. And so we need to question everything. And when new facts come, we need to question them again. And so, you know, I'm not going to say
Understood, but you're not pitching an alternate theory. You're not pitching an alternate theory of what happened on 9/11.
No, I've never pitched. Okay. I've never pitched an alternate theory.
There's a lot in the air accusing you of it. I want to give you the opportunity to address it, and you have. That's what we do here. So, Bobby Kennedy, again, I've known you a long time. People know that we've been friends for a long time. I don't do you any favors if I don't tell you what they're saying about you and give you a chance to handle it on your own terms for this audience. And that's what you'll get every time out.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. I've told you before, I want you to always be tough on me, and you're a good journalist, and I appreciate that.
It's not tough. It's just fair. If they're going to say it about you, I should say it to you and give you a chance to deal with it face-to-face with the audience. You can come after me when I see you in person. Bobby Kennedy, Jr., thank you for taking the opportunity. Happy Easter.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Happy Easter to you and your family.
That's why they Yeah. Now that's a big deal. Can you hold this thing for me? Yeah. I went to them and beefed about their arbitrary close down of Nevada test site. And if you'll roll, I'll start narration. Here comes the truck. Now, this is the armored truck that will carry Lee Harold Oswald from the basement here of Dallas Police Headquarters downtown to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the Dallas County Jail. Strict security precautions have been exercised from the very beginning and have been even increased this morning as fear arises and grows stronger that someone may attempt to take the life of the man accused of murdering the President of the United States. Inside the basement here at Dallas Police Headquarters, guards are stationed at points all across the inside of the basement. All incoming cars throughout the morning have been carefully checked. Even the police vehicles have been searched inside the trunk and inside the rear compartments of paddy wagons that have entered here in the basement. Officers have checked every vehicle coming in, and no one who is not a member of the press and not able to show identification can enter the basement. The basement is empty except for a large gathering of reporters who are now watching the truck being moved into position. Outside the building, a large force of heavily armed police have kept a constant ring around Dallas City Hall, and a comparatively small group of spectators are now gathered across from the basement entrance from which the armored car will depart. Security precautions have been tightened more and more as the morning has worn on. According to the people in the jail office, Oswald spent a restful night and got perhaps a good night's sleep. They said that he did rest well and was awakened a short while ago. From here to Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the jail there, a heavy police escort will accompany the armored car in which Lee Harold Oswald will be riding. Jail office to the armored vehicle will be clear. Armed guards are stationed throughout Dallas City Hall and the police headquarters. There is a ring of armed policemen outside, some carrying riot guns, some carrying riot guns and handguns as well. A number of police vehicles are lined up further to our rear here in the basement and are preparing to depart along with the armored vehicle. The car is being backed slowly down the ramp here into the basement. Apparently they're having some difficulty in clearance. This is an armored truck from the Dallas County Sheriff's Department, and apparently the clearance is going to be a little bit high. It's difficult from our vantage point here to see exactly what trouble the officers are having. People still are wondering exactly when Oswald will come down, and although from yesterday morning it has been known that Oswald would be transferred from the Dallas City Jail to the Dallas County Jail, no one has known exactly when the transfer would take place. It was only known that it would take place when full preliminary questioning had been completed by the office of Dallas Homicide Captain Will Fritz. At the far end of the night last night, reporters kept their vigil here at Dallas City Hall, and only after the announcement came shortly before 10 o'clock Central Standard Time was it known that Oswald would be moved today. This is Nelson Benton.
Where's our camera? All right. Where's the floor manager? Excuse me, Tom. Where's our floor manager? Will you tell me what they want from me here, please? This is Benton. Yeah. This is Benton. Go ahead. Well, you don't know what they want from here as yet. Lee, I would like, if it's all right, if they want a situation, tell them we'd like to start where I can see both monitors. You can take this scene down here first, then you can take the exterior, and I'll walk in the camera before I get through with it, okay? Okay, I'll come up there and tell you about it. Thank you. I don't understand what they want. I'm going to have to go back. Okay. All right, be talking just about like this. Have they given you any idea of what they want right now yet?
I think the situation pieces out. It looks like it could be too imminent.
Well,
If they want the situation, tell them that we'll start it. I'll be off. We'll start with this shot. Well, if you want, I can get on your on this one. Or if you want, I can start up in front of the armored car, and you can just listen to what I'm talking about. And you can switch cameras. But the main thing is that when he actually leaves, I want to be here where I can see him. Yeah, if you talking here. Right. And once he gets in the van, I'll go out there so that once he pulls away, you can pick me up, both video and audio. Well, there'll be not a lot of talk in here. You'll probably speak. It's all right. Well, it's all right. All right. Well, do you want me to just do it out there? Whichever you think you want to do it. Please? I think we should do a lot better. See, getting out there, he's back down and like he's telling what's going on. If they want a situation, I'll go out and stand by the truck. Why don't you do it right here? All right. Do you want to do the audio over him getting in? No. If he's getting in, let Huffaker try to grab him. Get anything you can. If I see microphones in his face down there, I'm going to shut up. And you take audio from down there until he's in the truck. Well, we'll speed both audio. Very good. Yeah, I'll get him both. See, we've got to keep the speaker off so we don't get feedback. Unfortunately, the audio man's the only guy there that's hears you. I'll follow. But there's no point in my trying to get where I can be seen. I'd rather see what's going on. Once the truck is gone, I'll keep talking and go on out to the camera. If you can get me in. Huh? Well, there's no way I can ask the guy any questions. Yeah, well, but I'd like to pick up the natural audio from down there. Pick up natural sound from down there. All right, we got a little activity down there. I don't know what it is. Which is that's the line. All right. Yeah, you This is
news audio only. He's going to leave. Don't close the door. I'm going to leave eventually. Right. Just tell him, get the mic.
Okay. All right.
When I throw it, I just throw it to the courthouse. Ready to go. Is that right? Now, do I throw it to the courthouse on my own discretion?
Get over there and sign
Do they know who's at the courthouse?
Okay, let's forget it. Do it.
This is the basement floor of the Dallas City Hall, and that's a scuffle on the basement floor. It seems to concern photographers.
He has been shot. Oswald has been shot.
Lee Oswald.
Oswald has been
we're
shot.
going to switch now.
Police are pulling.
We're going to switch now to Bob Hofhacker down in the basement of the courthouse, who is close to the scene. Go ahead, Bob.
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot.
All right, I'm going outside.
They're cooperating, Dick. They're all cooperating.
All right, we're switching now. We're still looking at the basement entrance from the jail, from the Houston County Jail. And we're going to try to bring in Bob Hoffaker of KRLD. Can you hear us down there, Bob? Can you give us an account of what happened?
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot. We saw no one fire the shot, only a blast from some bullet here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Oswald fell to the concrete in front of our eyes and immediately was covered by police officers who took him quickly, immediately, instantly from our sight. Police have ringed the inside and no one is allowed to leave. Everyone is being held in place and police officers are not even allowing anyone to move. It is mass confusion. Police are holding everyone in place and no one is... Pardon me. An ambulance is being ready to take Oswald away. Would you please get off? Just a moment.
Now this is the exterior of the... Now this is the exterior of the Dallas City Hall. We're watching this policeman guarding the door. Now we back
He was one of the detectives. He was a stocky guy, well dressed, with a hat he had on.
Where did he go?
Brown hat up. I don't know. I think his coat was brown and his hat was
Where did
black.
he go, Pierre?
Well, he was here. He just shot there. He just put the gun there. I saw the flash on the black sweater. Oh yeah, right there. And the guy. Oh, wait, did you see his gun? Yeah. Right here. I mean, I saw the flash on the black sweater. Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah. The flash. The both were crouching. No, I saw him there. He was in the group of men right here.
Masquerading as one of us or what?
I thought he was one of the detectives. You know, he had a hat and stocky was well dressed. That's what I remember.
Had you seen him before?
I think he had his hat.
There were none of us in this area.
Maybe he flew up. I don't know because I look at the flash.
There were no reporters in this area.
What? No. The trouble is I got distracted.
All right, now that's the situation here.
The situation is now that Lee Harold Oswald has been shot. The man who saw the shot fired said it was fired by a man wearing a black hat, a brown coat, a man that everyone down here thought was a Secret Service agent. The Oswald was moved immediately from the area. No one knows at this time where Lee Harold Oswald is. At the present time, word is that an ambulance is being ready to take Oswald away. We can hear sirens outside, and an ambulance apparently is moving down now into the basement. Here comes the ambulance. And Oswald will be removed now. The ambulance is being pulled up in front of us here.
It is almost unbelievable.
Here, someone has...
Please, get back. Back. Okay, just get low. Okay.
Pat, can you move? Okay. Pat, move just a little to your left.
We can see now that police are hemming off newsmen in the basement of the Dallas City Hall, hemming them off so that Lee Oswald can be taken to an ambulance, which was just brought into the basement of the City Hall. We're switching now to Bob Huffaker downstairs.
Oswald will be moved quickly outside, and the only word so far is that the shot came from a man wearing a black hat and a coat. Here comes Oswald. He is ashen and unconscious at this time, now being moved in. He's not moving. He's in the ambulance now. The attendants, police are quickly climbing in. They're now having to remove the armored truck from the head of the basement entrance here. And the ambulance is waiting for the attendants to move the armored truck, which
This is the armored truck on the outside of the Dallas Police Department. It's being moved out onto Commerce Street, and now the ambulance is coming out. The ambulance with Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shot just a few minutes ago as he was being transferred to the was planning to be transferred from the city jail to the county courthouse. Now let's go back to Harry Reasoner in New York.
Receive emergency treatment. When Oswald left, his face was ashen. He was not moving. He lay on... Captain?
What do you look like?
Captain, do they have
What
him
is
in
it?
there? Do they have him in there, Captain?
No.
The man is now in there, according to Captain C.O. Arnett, we just talked with here. Captain.
With the identification, your press identification, so forth, you won't come through the doors you may now.
Okay, sir. Captain Arnett, he actually is now inside there. Did they have the gun?
He's in the cell.
He's in the cell, and did they get the gun? They did get the gun. What kind was it? Do you know?
No, I don't.
And he was known locally, is that correct?
I think so.
Are you prepared at this time to say his name?
No.
Okay, sir. The situation is mass confusion here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters, where Lee Harold Oswald, the man accused of assassinating the President of the United States, has just sustained a bullet wound injury by a man whom everyone down here thought was a member of the Secret Service. The man is now high above us in a cell of Dallas Police Headquarters. They do have the gun. No one says what kind it is as yet. However, Lee Harold Oswald is now in an ambulance speeding on his way to Dallas Parkland Hospital for emergency treatment. Only 2 days ago, the situation in Dallas was extra precaution to ensure the safety of the President of the United States. And today, it was the precaution to ensure the safety of the man accused of his murder, Lee Harold Oswald, the 24-year-old ex-Marine who is now on his way to Parkland Hospital. Further word will be coming from inside just as soon as we can get information on where this man is, who the man is, who fired the shot that struck Oswald before our very eyes. We'll have the information from then. Outside, there is still a ring of police officers continuing to encircle Dallas Police Headquarters. And exactly what is happening on the inside of that room, we don't know. Captain
We're standing now outside the city police department of Dallas, where Lee Harvey Oswald was shot a few moments ago. There's a law official out of our camera range who we're going to try and get what's being said. Okay, newsmen are being allowed down into the basement now. Those on the outside of the building were kept outside by police, and this discussion here has just been over whether they're to be allowed inside. The information that we've been able to get so far is that Lee Harvey Oswald, as he was about to be transferred from here at the Dallas City Jail, came down to the basement, was headed toward an armored car that was to take him to the county jail. He was shot. We do not know who shot him. However, the man who shot him, the word from down here is that he has been arrested. The weapon that was used to shoot him, the police have, and now the investigation is going on somewhere probably up on either the 3rd or 4th floor of a Dallas City Police Department. I think Bob Huffaker is down where the shooting occurred. We'll see if we can pull him in now. Bob Huffaker, if you have anything, would you please come in from down in the basement of the City Hall from the spot where it's on. I think Bob Huffaker is down where the shooting occurred. We'll see if we can pull him in now. Bob Huffaker, if you have anything, would you please come in from down in the basement of the City Hall from the spot where it's on.
No, he made a straight dive for him, but he was from behind and the left of me from somewhere. Because I was trying to get them out, get this car back down here, because they had the car blocked here and they had it here. And as I tried to get them back, he broke through from behind me somewhere.
What so far has been done with the man that you took into custody?
I couldn't tell you. I've been trying to keep the mob out of the way.
You're a man in custody, sir?
You
do have a man in custody who fired the shot?
Oh, yes, sir.
Did you see him fire the shots?
No.
And how many people thus far have said that they did see the actual
I couldn't tell you a thing about it
shot
because
fired?
I didn't see it. I was trying to get the press out of the way so we could get to the car.
Do you have the name of the suspect?
Yeah. There's the deputy chief right over there.
Okay.
Could you please tell me again, sir, what happened? I'm sorry, I just arrived.
Well, I can't tell you.
Pat, did you see that man fire the shot?
I didn't see him as he fired it. At the moment the shot was fired, I turned around. I did see the smoke from the gun. It was that instant.
Did you see the gun in his hand?
No, I didn't.
This is Sergeant Patrick Dean of the Dallas Police Department who was standing beside us. Pat, you saw the smoke from the gun.
Yes.
And did you see the man?
Yes.
What did he look like to you, Pat?
Well, he was a man dressed in a suit, would appear as one of the pressmen. However, I was at the top of the ramp, Bob, waiting at the armored car that we were supposed to take into the county jail in.
Right.
Now, from that location is when I saw the smoke from the gun. As far as identifying him at that time, at that distance, I couldn't.
Right. I know you were.
We happened to be to Oswald.
He was taken back into the jail office. An ambulance was called, and he is at the hospital now.
Where was he wounded?
He had a wound in his lower left abdomen. As far as I could tell, it was the only one. I think there was only one shot that was fired.
It appeared, right, there was only one shot. It was right here. But, Pat, you say it was in his lower left abdomen.
Yes, sir.
He was unconscious inside?
Yes, he was.
Does he look like he's dying?
I wouldn't want to say.
Did you hear anything he said? Did he say anything? He touched himself, and did he say anything?
Are you talking about Oswald? Or... No, he didn't. He was unconscious.
What about the man? Did he run at all, or what happened?
No, he was immediately subdued by the officers at the time he fired the shot.
How many shots?
Just one shot. Now then, thus far, Pat, is the man upstairs in the cell?
As far as I know, he's either in the jail or at Captain Fritz's office. I imagine he'd probably be in jail.
Do you know this subject? Do you know him? Have you seen him before?
Yes, I do.
Is he from Dallas?
Yes.
He is?
I couldn't tell you.
I know you can't release the name now, but do you know what kind of business he happens to be in?
Bob, I wouldn't want to say.
Right.
Okay. Did he have to be disarmed, or did he give up?
We had to disarm him.
Did he struggle?
As much as he could, yes, but he was...
The struggle completely
he was mumbling, I couldn't hear. I couldn't understand what he did say.
Now,
did Oswald say anything?
No, Oswald didn't.
What?
Now,
did he have a pistol?
Yes,
do you know what kind of pistol he was carrying?
No, Bob, I never saw the pistol itself. Some other, I think Officer Graves had got the gun immediately after he fired the shot.
He was in civilian clothes?
Yes.
Try to get away?
No, he was immediately subdued by the officers.
He wouldn't have had a chance to get away.
How many shots were fired?
Just one shot.
Did you
What
see?
was Oswald wearing? Do you remember when he came out?
I didn't pay too much attention.
But did you know the man? Did you see the man before?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
You saw his face?
Yes, sir.
And you knew him?
Yes, sir.
Pat, he is a resident of Dallas, is he not?
Yes, sir. And that's all I'd want to say about the man inside.
When the shot was fired about 3 feet away from Oswald? It looked like that about...
We're questioning Officer Patrick Dean of the Dallas Police Department, who was standing beside me when the shot was fired here in the basement, as Lee Harold Oswald was almost ready to go to Dallas County Jail.
I came immediately down the ramp to assist the officers.
Officer, do you know this man personally? Yes. In the line of duty or in another way?
Sir, I wouldn't want to say.
But he is known to you as a police officer?
As a police officer?
That is, you as a police officer know him, is that correct?
Yes.
Was he connected in any way with this?
I don't know.
Had you seen him here in the building before the shot was fired?
No, sir.
Pat, could you outline briefly some of the security precautions that were taken immediately before this happened?
Yes, sir. We thoroughly searched the basement. We had searched even the cars up on top of the pipes and things that a person might conceal himself. There was about 15 to 20 men that had searched this place prior to 30 minutes. In fact, searched it twice, about an hour before and then 30 minutes before.
How many officers did you have outside, approximately, would you say?
About 20.
About 20 officers outside the building, and they are armed with riot guns, pistols, and all kinds of things.
Yes, sir. Some few of them are.
And you were then ready?
In here?
No, sir.
You haven't
today? No, sir.
Not today. Is there anything else that you possibly might tell us about him, Pat? I know that at the present time you're bound and can't say very much, but you have said that he is from Dallas and that you do know this subject and have seen him before.
Yes, sir, I do know.
Is there anything that you could say about him further than the fact that he is a resident of Dallas, the man who shot Oswald, to shed some more light on it?
Well, Bob, that would be all I'd want to say, really.
I'm sure that's the case. Now, at present, what in the way of release is going on inside? How soon do you think we're going to be able to know who this man is?
Well, the information would have to come from Captain Fritz's office.
Now, Captain Fritz came out of this door just a few steps ahead of Oswald. Do you know where he is at present?
No, sir, I don't.
Right. Captain Will Fritz is the master interrogator who was carrying on the interrogation yesterday.
Precautions have been taken. Were there any threatening phone calls during the night that there might be some effort to take?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know.
Have you heard that?
This is the case here in the basement of Dallas City Hall. The information is that the man who shot Lee Harold Oswald was a resident of Dallas. He was a man known to Dallas police. At present, he is high above us in a cell where he was taken only moments after the shot was fired. The shot was fired directly before our eyes, and we saw Lee Harold Oswald crumple and then be carried away quickly to Parkland Hospital by an ambulance. This is Bob Huffaker in the basement of Dallas City Hall. Now outside to Nelson Benton.
We made a very massive effort through the total cooperation of the federal investigating authorities and local authorities to interrogate everybody that we could find who allegedly had any information concerning Oswald's appearance or time that he spent in New Orleans. However, there's always a possibility in a criminal investigation that some evidence wasn't turned up, and if this is the case this time, I sincerely hope and trust that the law enforcement officials in New Orleans will fully cooperate with the Attorney General.
Congressman, to your knowledge, was the possibility of a conspiracy in New Orleans ever even mentioned during the investigation?
Oh, yes. The Warren Commission made a tremendous effort to interrogate every possible individual who allegedly had any connection with the assassination. We thoroughly investigated all aspects of Oswald's period of time in New Orleans. There was never any failure to do anything and everything we could to look into this aspect of Oswald's life.
Do you think the Warren Commission report is wrong?
Well, of course, wrong has a lot of connotations. I think the Warren report did not pretend to say exactly what happened. I think if their conclusion was, the conclusion of the Warren Commission was, that Lee Harvey Oswald went into this project unaided and without the assistance and help of other persons, then I would say that I think that the Warren Commission was wrong.
Now, Mr. Garrison, you have the Warren Commission, you have the FBI, you have the Secret Service, CIA, State Department, Defense Department, thousands of interviews, hundreds of witnesses. How could they all be wrong?
Well, of course, first of all, let me remind you of the old saying that one man with the truth constitutes a majority. The point being that volume, the number of individuals investigating can be irrelevant. But even more pertinent, I think, is the fact that all of this investigative machinery lacked an evaluation mechanism. There was at no point any effective evaluation function being exercised. The FBI, which is unquestionably one of the finest fact-gathering agencies in the world, if not the very best, has never pretended to have machinery set up for evaluation. They're not geared for it in the old Scotland Yard tradition. They have other functions, so that they did not have evaluation machinery, nor did they pretend to. So, in effect, they sent thousands of boxes of material to be digested further up the line. On the other hand, the Warren Commission itself, the way it was constituted, was also left without evaluation machinery. In my judgment, the men on the Warren Commission are all honorable men, to say the least, men of character and devotion to their country. But they were left without the assistance of evaluation machinery, a team of evaluators, so that nowhere in the picture was there effective evaluation. Our team is so small that, in contrast, it is almost humorous. But we have put a heavy premium on evaluation, and as a result, I think we made quite a bit of progress. What started out as a routine investigation of possible local involvement of the assassination of President Kennedy has uncovered certain facts which we consider extremely interesting. So I would say that the investigation is no longer routine, but it is now extremely interesting, and it will continue.
Garrison, the Warren Commission said that Oswald acted alone and there was no conspiracy. Apparently you do not believe the Warren Commission's report. Is that correct?
That's correct. I believe the Warren Commission was wrong and will be shown to be wrong.
Mr. Garrison, on the basis of what you've just said, then, do you feel there should be a new investigation of the slaying of President Kennedy on a level higher than yours, such as it's been suggested by some people, a new federal investigation?
Well, Ed, actually, I think that effective investigation, by that I mean imaginative investigation in which there is effective evaluation and not simply the blind collection of volumes of evidence at every level is justified in a case like this. I would have to answer yes, except that I would hope that this time more premium would be placed on the evaluation function. But of course it would be better if more agencies cooperated and gave each other information, worked together. A matter like this justifies a number of concurrent investigations.
Mr. Garrison, has it always been your belief that the Warren Commission was inaccurate?
No. As a matter of fact, I think I accepted the Warren report without question until last fall, last November, when out of curiosity I began reading and then studying this case, and then I went into the 26 volumes of the Warren report, realized there were some questions. Then we started investigating here, and then we found that the Warren Commission was wrong.
Expand just a little bit on your discussions about lack of cooperation between your office and the federal government and how they're standing in your way.
Oh, I have no complaints. You can hardly really expect these federal agencies that are involved with concealment or fundamental information about the assassination to cooperate with us. I don't expect it to be like expecting a man who's just robbed a bank to cooperate with us in the investigation of the robbery. I understand their problem. It doesn't make them right, but I really don't expect them to cooperate.
Is a willing witness and a cooperative witness.
I don't think Newsweek sort of justifies as much comment as I've made.
How do you think Mr. Bobuck eventually the case has really been hurt? Your investigation of the assassination has really been hurt by this lack of cooperation with the federal government.
Well, I don't want to complain about it because, again, I can't expect too much from parties in the case. But I'll say that it certainly has been a cause of delay, but as to preventing us from being successful, there's no chance in the world. I'm sure that they think they can, but they're wasting their time.
Mr. Garrison, do you think that the federal agency...
Number one, are you getting all of your witnesses to take lie detector tests, sodium pentothal, and hypnosis? Number two, how much involvement does the CIA have in this?
That's question number one. We started off with the naive intention of requiring witnesses to take these objectifying tests in order to assure ourselves that there was no question about the truth. Almost immediately, to our astonishment, we found that when we used truth serum and hypnosis, that it was used against us, and we were suddenly described as monsters hypnotizing the witness. And at that point, we said, forget it. In other words, there's no use wasting our time. If they think our efforts to objectify our witness are something sinister, then we just don't have time to fool with it. So we give lie detectors now to witnesses we think are lying in the usual way that other jurisdictions do. Apparently, people are happier when you do it.
The CIA or the FBI to answer the charges that they've taken the Fifth Amendment. Do you expect them to answer these charges, and that in the past they've always remained closed-mouthed about such matters, or any matter for that matter?
I don't know, honestly, I don't know what they could say in this case, because...
do you expect them to say anything?
If you excuse the expression on television, they've been caught with their pants down.
In other words, they have to know that what I'm saying is true. And it's just like the picture that I pointed out last week that CIA had faked sent to the Warren Commission. Every American in this country can look in volume 16 at Exhibit 237 and see the fake picture, which is described as a picture of an unidentified man. And they can't answer because there is no answer.
Some time ago, you said in the Petroleum Club, we have solved the assassination. We know who did it. Do you still stand by that statement?
Well, there's no question about that, but we have a small problem of corralling all the evidence in order to be able to go into the courtroom. It's a standard problem for prosecutors, and we're in the evidentiary phase now, but there's been no changes at all on the evaluation we reached months ago.
Do you have enough evidence now to go to trial?
Well, if I answered that, I shouldn't be distant.
Do you remember the CIA to Syria?
I'm sorry, I can't comment on plans in that way. I have to talk in generalities. I can tell you what we're doing.
Wouldn't it be advantageous for the grand jury to hear from Richard Helms, the director of the CIA?
It would be advantageous if we were to hear from him, but again, I don't know what he would say.
Would you expect
you know how to get him down here?
Would you expect the same thing to happen with Mr. Helms that happened this morning with Mr. Kennedy?
I would have to guess that, but again, there's no way for me to say in advance.
Legally, is there any possible way for you to get agents down here into Louisiana?
Well, since that is the subject coming up in court next week, I'd rather invite you to next week's show and see the answer. What did you say, Sam?
I asked you, Mr. Garrison, if you had it to do over again, would you launch another investigation?
Yes, I would have to, because once you know that something was hidden, once you know what happened, then you have no choice. But I would say that I would do it with a great deal of reluctance, because it never occurred to me that so many people would take it for granted that I would lie about such a subject. But now that I've discovered that a large segment of the American press takes it for granted that you're automatically a liar because you're elected to office, I would go in again, but I would go in with more reluctance.
Can I ask Senator Long to help you get the Senate investigation that you've called for on this?
No, I'm not going to ask the Senate to do anything. No, the thing I said the other day, to clarify that, was I hope that the American people will call on Congress to do something, because I think there should be a congressional inquiry of this collusion by government officials. If the American people are not interested enough to call on the members of Congress, that's their business.
Do you feel you're violating the court guidelines by commenting on the case today?
You got to be kidding.
Do you feel that any kind of investigation by the Senate or Congress will come out of your investigation?
I can't really say. There's no way for me to guess.
What do you think of the treatment you're getting from the news media?
Now, who writes your questions? Your switchboard operator? That's all right.
The following time period has been made available to District Attorney Jim Garrison of New Orleans to reply to an NBC News program broadcast on June 19th. In that program, NBC News examined some of the methods used by Mr. Garrison in his investigation of what he charges was a conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. Except for the opening and closing announcements, this program has been prepared under Mr. Garrison's sole supervision. Mr. Garrison.
Tonight I'm going to talk to you about truth and about fairy tales, about justice and about injustice. In the months to follow, you're going to learn that many of the things which some of the major news agencies have been telling you are untrue. You're going to learn that although you are citizens of the United States, information concerning the cause of the death of your president has been withheld from you. In the months to come, you will learn to your own satisfaction that President Kennedy was not killed by a lone assassin. You will learn that there has been and continues to be a concerted effort to keep you from learning these facts. And you will learn, I assure you, that what I have been trying to tell you and what I'm telling you tonight is true. As children, we become accustomed to hearing fairy tales. They're always pleasant stories, and they're comforting to hear because good always triumphs over evil. At least, this is the way it is in fairy tales. Fairy tales are not dangerous for our children and are probably even good for them up to a point. However, in the real world in which you and I must live, Fairy tales are dangerous. They're dangerous because they're untrue. Anything which is untrue is dangerous. And it is all the more dangerous when a fairy tale becomes accepted as reality simply because it has an official seal of approval, or because honorable men announce that you must believe it, or because powerful elements of the press tell you that the fairy tale is true. The conclusion of the Warren Report that President Kennedy was killed by a lone assassin is a fairy tale. This does not mean that the men on the Warren Commission were aware at the time that their conclusion was totally untrue, nor does it mean necessarily that these men had any sinister motives. It does mean that the conclusion that no conspiracy existed and that Lee Oswald was the lone assassin is a fiction and a myth, and that it should be brought to an end. The people of this country don't have to be protected from the truth. This country was not built on the idea that a handful of nobles, whether located in our federal agencies in Washington, D.C., or in the news agencies in New York, should decide what was good for the people to know and what they should not know. This is a totalitarian concept which presumes that the leaders of our federal government and the men in control of the powerful press media constitute a special elite, which by virtue of their nobility and their brilliance empower them to think for the people. Personally, I would rather put my confidence in the common sense of the people of this country. The truth about the assassination of the president has been concealed from you long enough. Those forces which are fighting so hard today to tell you that they have examined the Warren Report and that everything is fine and that our investigation has uncovered nothing are not merely going to lose this fight. They have already lost it. Now let me tell you why President Kennedy was murdered and how he was murdered. I also want to give you a few examples which will show you how the conclusion reached by the Warren Commission is totally impossible. President Kennedy was assassinated by men who sought to obtain a radical change in our foreign policy, particularly with regard to Cuba. You recall that under President Kennedy, the Cold War began to thaw, and there were new signs of an effort on the part of the Soviet Union and ourselves to understand each other. On the map, this appears to be merely a large island off the coast of Florida. But for many men, it meant a good deal more than this. In 1963, a great variety of interests existed which not only desired an American-supported invasion of Castro's Cuba, but took it for granted that it was inevitable. In the minds of many men, this island represented a tremendous emotional landmark because they had steered their courses toward it for so long and with such intensity. In the fall of 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. It was followed by a pronounced new attitude towards Cuba on the part of the United States. Cuba, after this, was no longer regarded as an enemy and was no longer regarded as fair game for those men who, for one reason or another, focused their attention on this island. The new signs of understanding between Russia and the United States continued to develop. In June of 1963, President Kennedy, addressing students at the American University in Washington, told them, "We breathe the same air as the Russians." He said we should try to live together in peace on this earth. Well, at this point, some individuals transferred their hostile attention from Fidel Castro to John F. Kennedy. They planned the president's assassination, and they planned it well. The evidence indicates that he was shot at from two different directions in the rear, and also from the right front. We know that shooting was coming from two separate directions in the rear because the president and Governor Connolly were hit in the back within a split second of each other. And this necessarily had to happen with two bullets coming from two different rifles. We know that the president was being shot at from the grassy knoll area on the right front because most of the people in Dealey Plaza heard the shots coming from there. and because at least one of the president's wounds was an entry wound from the front, and because men were seen running from the grassy knoll area immediately afterwards. That's why the idea of Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin of the president is a fairy tale and should be brought to an end. If you, the people of the United States, will learn the truth that the president was assassinated by men who were once connected with a Central Intelligence Agency, of course, this might reflect on the dignity of the CIA. But I happen to believe that our form of government is strong enough to survive the truth. I believe that you are entitled to the truth about how your president was shot down in the street and how it was done. Instead, some of the most powerful news agencies we have in our country have worked hard to convince you that everything is all right. They do not tell you that Lee Harvey Oswald's fingerprints were not found on the gun which was supposed to have killed the president. And they do not tell you that nitrate tests exonerated Lee Oswald from the actual shooting by showing that he had not fired a rifle that day. And they do not tell you that it was virtually impossible for Oswald to have taken his fingerprints off the gun, hidden the gun, and gone down 4 flights of stairs by the time he was seen on the 2nd floor. Above all, they do not tell you of the overwhelming eyewitness testimony that shots were coming from behind the stone wall on the grassy knoll. In a choice between official dignity and the truth, dignity was given priority, and so you have not received the full truth. This is why there continue to be hundreds of documents still hidden from your eyes and classified as secret, and some of them bear such titles as Lee Harvey Oswald's accessibility to information about the U-2, the Central Intelligence Agency's dossier on Lee Harvey Oswald, and a CIA file on Jack Ruby. You have not been told that Lee Oswald was in the employ of United States intelligence agencies, but this was the case, and so I am telling you. Why, this young, uneducated man had learned to speak Russian even before he left the Marines, and there's only one way he could have learned that. Oswald had a higher security rating than his buddies in his Marine unit. During 12 hours of questioning, to give you another example, 12 hours of questioning after the assassination, there is no transcript of Oswald's statements available for you to look at. Now, it doesn't matter where you live. If somebody in your town steals a 1928 Hupmobile, what he says is written down when he's questioned. However, when the man who has just killed the President of the United States is questioned for 12 hours, no transcript is available. There's nothing for you to look at. And believe it or not, one of the explanations given is that the room was too small to include a stenographer. And here's something else. This case has more accidental fires, more burning of paper than any murder case in history. For example, when Oswald was questioned by a federal agent in August of 1963, the notes of the interview were later burned. You cannot see the notes made by Commander Humes concerning the President's autopsy because he burned them too. One of the questioners of Lee Harvey Oswald during the 12-hour session burned his notes. And similarly, when the Warren Commission contacted the State Department and said, with regard to Exhibit 948, we noticed that a one-page message from the CIA containing secret information is supposed to be attached to this file, and it's missing. Would you please furnish us with a copy of this missing secret document? The answer given to the Warren Commission was that the secret message about Oswald from the CIA was accidentally destroyed while being thermofaxed. This spontaneous combustion, incidentally, occurred the day after the President's assassination. I'm not even going to bother to dignify the foolishness which Newsweek and NBC and some of the other news agencies have tried to make you believe about my office. I've been District Attorney of New Orleans for more than 5 years, And we have never had a single case reversed because of improper methods on the part of our staff. Nor do we rush to judgment on half-baked evidence. And the proof of that is the fact that in more than 5 years, not one defendant has walked out of the courtroom in a murder case with an acquittal. Nor have we lost a major case in 5 years. Then what is their game? Their game is to fool you. These people want the investigation stopped. They don't want a trial at all. Please believe me, they don't think we're wrong in our investigation. Obviously, if our investigation was as haywire as they would like to have you think, then you would not see such a coordinated barrage coming from the news centers in the East. Why are they so concerned? Why is it that they cannot wait until the trial comes in order to learn what the facts are? Why are they so anxious to have their own trials? They know very well that the witnesses they're presenting to you have not been testifying under oath, that they're not being cross-examined as they would be at a trial, and that the opportunities for a timely rebuttal by the state of Louisiana, which would exist at a trial, have not been provided in their untrue presentations. They know this. In my considered judgment, there has been an effort to prejudice in advance the potential jurors in the trial of this case. As a matter of fact, the National Broadcasting Company has already had the trial. The defendant was found innocent, and the district attorney was convicted. They announced across the nation that my methods were improper. But as their stories, one by one, turn out to be false, they do not reveal this to you, but simply search hopefully into new areas. For example, Newsweek magazine had a feature article saying that my office attempted to bribe a man named Bobuff. It later turned out that his story and their article was totally untrue, and the tape which Newsweek described had been altered. The police investigators in my office were found innocent of any wrongdoing in a serious investigation conducted by the police department. However, Newsweek has made virtually no mention of that. Similarly, in its recent effort to make you think that my methods are improper, NBC announced coast to coast that it had located the real Clay Bertrand, that an NBC man had talked to him. This made every newspaper in the country, and it inferred, once again, that in addition to using terrible methods, we were off on a wild goose chase. Now, when it turned out that this was a total fabrication, and the man whom NBC identified as the real Clay Bertrand hotly denied ever using the name, there was only coast-to-coast silence from NBC. NBC presented a professional burglar whom my office had just recently convicted and allowed him to make a plainly false presentation that we had tried to get him to climb into the defendant's apartment and plant evidence there. The inference, of course, was that this particular defendant was too lofty a character to participate in my nefarious schemes. However, recently, when we called him before the New Orleans grand jury so that he could tell all about our new venture into the burglary business, he took the Fifth Amendment when asked if his statement on NBC was true. Once again, this was followed by loud silence from coast to coast on NBC. As a matter of fact, the Warren Commission's inquiry into the assassination started off with a completely unacceptable philosophy for a democracy like ours. One of its stated objectives was to calm the fears of the people about a conspiracy. But in our country, the government has no right to calm our fears any more than it has, for example, the right to excite our fears about Red China or about fluoridation or about birth control or about anything. There's no room in America for thought control of any kind, no matter how benevolent the objective. Personally, I don't want to be calm about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I don't want to be calm about a president of my country being shot down in the streets. And I don't want to be calm about the fact that for reasons of public policy or national security or any other phony reason, the true facts have been withheld from the people of this country. If the day has come when it is possible to shoot our president down because some men disagree with his foreign policy, and the day has come that the moment his heart stops beating, other considerations take over which conceal the total truth from the citizens of the United States, then the day has come when we have ceased to be a democracy. I cannot believe that this is so, that the time has come in America when the people no longer control their country. Yet I must confess that I'm appalled by the readiness with which some of the major press media have accepted the great fairy tale without hesitation, rousing from their stupor only when they have learned that a district attorney was violating all the rules of etiquette and digging up the truth. They're telling you that black is white when they tell you there is no evidence of a conspiracy. They have to know well the significance of the continued concealment of X-rays and autopsy pictures, which, if revealed to you, would show that the president was hit by rifle fire from more than one direction. And they have to know well of the hundreds of documents which remain classified secret and concealed from your view. And they're making white black when they repeatedly state that my office is using improper methods. They have to know that no DA's office in the United States would dream of operating in the way they suggest. They have to know that for years I have been a strong defender of the rights of individuals. They have to know all of this, but they have lent themselves to the all-out effort to convince you that the matter's been looked into, and anyone who raises a question now is irresponsible or a troublemaker or an enemy of the people. What's that? You say that you are an American citizen and you want to see the autopsy X-rays and you want to see these hundreds of documents that have been withheld from your view, and you want to know why these vital notes always ended up being burned? What's the matter with you? Can't you take the word of these honorable men who've looked into it for you? Let me just give you one example that shows you how impossible the single assassination theory is, which shows you the enormity of the fairy tale which you're supposed to believe in. Now, this is the Warren Commission's own diagram of the route of the bullet through Governor Connally. The bullet had to take this route in order to cause the injuries which he received. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that the Warren Commission itself concedes that if this same bullet was not the one which also went through President Kennedy, then there had to be someone else firing. And the reason for that, just to put it very simply, is the Zapruder films have shown that all the firing occurred in 6 seconds, and yet there were a total of 8 wounds. Therefore, this one bullet has to cause 7 wounds, because one missed and one was the fatal shot hitting the president. So, by the Warren Commission's own admission, prior to hitting the governor, this bullet had to go through President Kennedy, who is sitting back here. Now, you'll notice that the Warren Commission did not attempt to include President Kennedy in the diagram. They could not, because the total impossibility of this bullet having gone through the president also would be too obvious. In other words, by the evidence of the Warren Commission itself, it is obvious that there was other shooting going on in Dealey Plaza. Consequently, the Warren Commission has officially concluded that before this bullet came down from the sky, as it had to hit Governor Connally and all those different places, it entered President Kennedy's body from the rear and came out of his neck. I might add that the Warren Commission did not try to include the president's picture because that would have shown that the course of the magic bullet would have had to gone up in the air and come down again in order to end up hitting the governor. It is by selecting these little portions of each incident and by excluding other portions that the fairy tale is presented to you. However, if they had to show in one diagram the bullet entering the president and then continuing through Governor Connolly, you would be able to see the total impossibility of this bullet causing 7 wounds. Now, this is just one of many examples which show that the Warren Commission's conclusion is completely impossible. The bullet 399 is another example. The fact that the cartridges in the Tippit case do not match at all the bullets in Tippit's body, one after the other. If I had the total hour to reply, which NBC used to try and discredit my office, I would be able to go into more matters. But let's sum it up by saying that it is completely impossible to uphold the single assassin theory if you look at it seriously. Anyone who has done their homework knows that the single assassin theory is totally impossible. In the final analysis, what has been done by the Warren Commission in its investigation is to take this series of implausibilities and to attempt to prove to you that each one of them is at least mathematically possible. Each one of them is mathematically possible, but not probable. However, it is not mathematically possible for all of these series of implausibilities to have occurred. And this is what they ask you to believe. It's very much like telling you that it is mathematically possible, for example, for an elephant to hang from a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy. Of course, this is implausible. But what do? They produce an expert who says, yes, I have made a study of the situation, and this is not a full-grown elephant, and this is a particularly tough kind of daisy, and therefore it was mathematically possible. Now, the official truth, as a result of such expert testimony, as a result of the creation of a series of mathematical possibilities, is now no longer what actually happened in Dallas, but what has been officially approved. Well, I say that the matter is not closed, not in this country. I say that the day has not yet arrived when the only reality is power, and the ideals on which our country was built are merely words printed on paper. I believe that those news agencies which have sought to imply that I would use improper methods to gain some sort of fictional political advantage have simply revealed their own cynicism. I believe that in this conflict between truth and power, and this is exactly what it is all about, that power cannot possibly smash truth out of existence. The people in this country will not let that happen. If we still live in the same country in which we were born, and I don't think it's changed that much, if this is still the country in which, in the words of our Pledge of Allegiance, there exists liberty and justice for all, then this attempt to conceal the full truth from you, in the end, has to be a failure. Now, in this case, I've learned more about the human race than I really wanted to know. And I've learned more about some of our government agencies than I really wanted to know. And I've learned more about some of our press agencies than I cared to know. But I am still naive enough to believe that in America, the people make the decisions, not a handful of men in the Washington and New York areas. And I believe that the people of America want to know the entire truth about how their president was shot down in the streets of Dallas. And I want to assure you that as long as I am alive, no one is going to stop me from seeing that you obtain the full truth, and nothing less than the full truth, and no fairy tales.
Time for the preceding program was made available to District Attorney Jim Garrison of New Orleans. The program was prepared under his sole supervision. It constitutes his reply to an earlier NBC News program examining some of the methods Mr. Garrison has used in his investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy. This program originated in the studios of WDSU-TV in New Orleans.
Soon after I can't even believe I have to say this, nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania last month, Bobby called me to express his best wishes. He knows firsthand the risks incurred by leaders who stand up to the corrupt political establishment. When you stand up, you bring on some trouble for yourself, but you have to do what's right. You have to do what's right for the country. I will tell you, we are both in this to do what's right for the country. That's one thing I can tell you. He lost his father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated threats to his safety during the course of his campaign while being denied protection by the Harris-Biden administration. And this is a tribute in honor of Bobby. I am announcing tonight that upon my election, I will establish a new independent Presidential Commission on Assassination Attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And they will also conduct a rigorous review of the attack last month